I had just sold my company after 40 years and moved into the lakefront penthouse I had dreamed about for decades. That afternoon, my daughter-in-law called. "Dad, can we stop by this weekend? Just a few close friends and family." I agreed. The next morning, the elevator doors kept opening. Strangers with cameras, lights, and champagne poured into my home. A woman laughed and showed me her phone. We paid $75 each to get in. I froze. I never sold any tickets. That was when I realized my son and daughter-in-law had sold access to my home behind my back. Welcome back to Father's Vengeance. Before we begin, drop a quick comment and tell me, have you ever faced betrayal from someone in your own family? Yes or no? Your perspective matters more than you think. Quick note, certain details here are fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. What truly matters is the lesson at the heart of this story. At 72, standing on the 42nd floor, with Lake Michigan stretched beneath me like hammered silver, I had no idea that the photograph I was about to post would cost me everything I'd spent 40 years building. 3 days earlier, I'd signed the final wire transfer papers, $6.8 million net after taxes. The sum total of Keller Automotive Group reduced to an electronic confirmation number and a handshake with a corporate acquisition attorney whose name I'd already forgotten. 8 garages across Chicagoland, 2 custom restoration shops, 40 years of 5:30 a.m. inventory checks and grease permanently embedded under my fingernails, gone in 90 minutes of paperwork. I'd used $4.5 million of it to buy this penthouse at 1 Bennett Park in Streeterville, floor-to-ceiling windows facing east toward the lake. 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 1,800 square feet of polished hardwood and imported Italian tile. The kind of place Catherine had circled in Chicago Magazine 20 years ago, back when we were still running a single garage in Wicker Park and dreaming felt safer than planning. "If you could see me now," I said to the empty living room, to her memory, to the ghost of a woman who died 7 years before I finally sold the business she'd begged me to walk away from. "You always said I'd work myself into the grave before I'd enjoy a single dollar." The September afternoon light painted the lake gold. Navy Pier jutted into the water like a promise. I'd moved in on Tuesday. Today was Friday. 3 days of peace so profound. It felt like holding my breath underwater, weightless, timeless, perfectly still. I pulled out my phone and walked onto the balcony. The air carried that particular September crispness that Chicago does better than anywhere else. Cool enough to remind you winter's coming, but warm enough to let you pretend it isn't. I framed the shot carefully, the lake, the skyline, the clouds reflected in the glass towers, marching north along the shore. I opened Facebook. My last post had been 3 months ago, a photo of Catherine's garden that her sister had maintained after the funeral, before I'd finally sold that house too. 43 likes. 16 comments of condolence that had felt like sandpaper every time I'd read them. This time I typed something simple, starting a new chapter. I added the photo. Then, without thinking about it, I tapped the location tag and selected 1 Bennett Park, Chicago. The post went live at 4:17 p.m. 3 likes appeared within 2 minutes. Old garage buddies Tommy Breslin, who'd worked my Wicker Park shop for 12 years, and Marcus Webb, who'd bought my Naperville location when I'd started consolidating. Good men. Men who understood what it meant to build something with your hands and then let it go. I poured 2 fingers of Maker's Mark into a crystal tumbler. Catherine had insisted we'd use someday for something other than storage. I sat in the leather chair facing the windows. I watched the sun descend. 22 minutes of perfect, unbroken peace. How long does it take for a single photograph to destroy a life? 22 minutes, as it turned out. My phone vibrated at 4:47 p.m. The screen displayed a name I hadn't seen in months. Margot Keller. Margot, 37. My son, Clayton's wife for 3 years, a lifestyle influencer who called herself Margot. Lives, Lux to her 180,000 Instagram followers hadn't dialed my number in 4 months, which made the sugary enthusiasm in her voice immediately suspicious. "Oh my God, Dad, the view is incredible." Her voice hit a pitch that felt performative rehearsed. "I had no idea you went this big. I mean, 1 Bennett Park. That's like serious, serious." I kept my voice neutral. "It's comfortable, suits my needs." "How many bedrooms? Is there really a rooftop pool? What floor are you on?" "Wait, I can see the tag, 42nd floor. Oh my God, that's insane." The questions came rapid-fire, invasive. Square footage, interior designer, building amenities, HOA fees. She'd never asked about my health, my plans, whether I was lonely in a space designed for 2. 2 bedrooms, I said. "Yes, there's a pool. Building has a gym." "This is so amazing, Dad. You deserve it after all those years in those garages. We should celebrate with you soon. The call lasted 7 minutes. When I hung up, I stared at the phone, trying to identify the unease crawling up my spine. Something felt calculated, predatory, but I couldn't name it, couldn't point to a single sentence that justified the instinct. I sipped my whiskey. I tried to shake it off. An hour passed. The sun dropped below the horizon, turning the lake from gold to slate to black. At 5:50 p.m., my phone chimed with a text. Margot. Hey, we were thinking, why don't we have a little get-together at your place this weekend? Nothing big, just some close friends and family. I read it twice. Nothing big. Just close friends? The words felt harmless. Clayton and Margot, maybe a few of their circle. Some wine and cheese on the balcony. A chance to be gracious. A chance to prove I wasn't the isolated old man Catherine had worried I'd become. I typed back, sure, keep it small. I had no idea that keep it small would become the most naive 2 words I'd ever sent. I hit send. I set the phone down. I finished my whiskey, watching the city lights multiply across the skyline like stars coming out in reverse. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, 3 floors below me in the Bennett Park underground garage, my son Clayton sat in his luxury sedan with Margot in the passenger seat. Both of them staring at a laptop screen displaying an Eventbrite dashboard. 28 tickets sold, $75 each, all for Sunday morning access to my penthouse. Access I'd never authorized. Access they'd never asked permission to sell. And on Margot's phone, already posted to her Instagram story, with a glittering champagne emoji and the words, big announcement. Sunday location dropping soon, was a screenshot of my balcony. View, my home, my earned sanctuary being packaged and marketed to 180,000 strangers as content. The digital trap had snapped shut. I just didn't hear it yet. I stared at my phone screen, at those 3 innocent words. Keep it small, and felt nothing but mild satisfaction at being a gracious father-in-law. Saturday morning would bring 3 elevators, 34 strangers, and the beginning of a war I didn't yet know I was fighting. Saturday morning, I woke at 9, anticipating a casual afternoon with family. I brewed coffee, set out cheese and wine for 4, maybe 5 people. Nothing elaborate. The first elevator doors slid open at 9:47, and I knew immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. My son, Clayton, 42, perpetually optimistic to the point of delusion, wearing an expensive jacket I'd probably paid for through one of his emergency loans, stepped out first with forced, casual energy that meant he was hiding something. Behind him came Margot, but not the Margot who showed up for dinners in jeans. This version wore designer clothes, staged for a photo shoot, hair and makeup professionally done, phone already raised like a weapon. Behind them, 8 strangers pushed luggage trolleys loaded with equipment. Hey, Dad. Clayton's voice carried too much volume. Hope you're ready for us. I stood in my doorway, coffee mug warm in my hand, watching ring lights, tripods, camera stabilizers, and branded equipment cases stream toward me. Clayton, I said slowly. Who are all these people? Oh my God, this hallway is stunning. Margot interrupted, not looking at me. Everyone wait until you see inside. The second elevator chimed, then the third. My confusion shifted into something colder. The feeling when your car's engine makes a sound it's never made before, and you know the damage is already done. Over the next 11 minutes, 2 more elevators disgorged 26 additional people. 34 total strangers flooding the 42nd floor. I recognized only Clayton, Margot, and 2 of Clayton's former business acquaintances. They streamed into my penthouse as if entering a rented venue. Someone activated a Bluetooth speaker, house music thumped through my living room. A woman in athleisure wear opened the rooftop pool, access without asking. 3 men hauled lighting equipment toward my balcony. Where do you want the main rig set up? One called to Margot. Kitchen or balcony? Wait. I set my coffee down hard enough that liquid sloshed over the rim. Stop. Nobody told me there would be this many. Dad, relax. Clayton stepped between me and the flood. It's just a little celebration. You said keep it small, and this is small. You should see some of Margot's other events. 34 people. I counted them twice. 34 strangers occupying the sanctuary I'd spent 40 years earning. Someone opened my wine, not the bottle I'd set out, but a reserve Bordeaux I'd been saving. A woman I'd never met posed on my balcony. Lake Michigan stretched behind her like a purchased backdrop. Corporate brand representatives in lanyards began setting up product displays on my granite counters. I stood in the corner of my own living room, invisible. At 10:30, Margot raised her phone and tapped the screen. The room shifted. People quieted, positioned themselves. Good morning, everyone. Her voice hit that performative pitch. Welcome to the family penthouse. I watched her screen from 15 feet away. The Instagram Live indicator glowed red. The viewer count climbed 800, 1200, 1800. We are on the 42nd floor of 1 Bennett Park in Streeterville. Margot continued, panning through my living room kitchen down the corridor. Lake Michigan view, private rooftop pool, and look at this kitchen, Italian tile, custom cabinetry, sub-zero, everything. Comments scrolled. Is this really your place? How much? Family goals. Clayton stepped into frame beside her, on camera, deliberate. Yeah, he said, nodding at the lens at the 2,400 strangers now watching. This is the fam. We wanted to share this space with everyone who supported Margot's journey. The fam. As if the deed bore his name. As if I'd invited this invasion. As if my 40 years of pre-dawn mornings had been a collaborative family project. I realized watching my son lie to thousands in real time that Clayton wasn't a passive enabler. He was an architect. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I stepped into my study and locked the door, muffling the music that had turned my living room into a nightclub at 10:45 Saturday morning. Hello, Mr. Keller. This is Glenn Mercer, property manager for 1 Bennett Park. His voice carried controlled tension of a man who'd handled luxury building crises before, but rarely ones. This brazen. We've received 5 complaints from other residents in the last 30 minutes. I looked through the frosted glass at shadows moving through my home. Someone laughed. Glass clinked. Margot's voice echoed. And here's the primary bedroom suite. Wait until you see the marble. How does a man become a stranger in his own home in less than an hour? Sir Bupper, Glenn continued. Are you aware your unit is currently being used for a commercial event? Commercial event. The words landed like a diagnosis I hadn't expected, but explained every symptom. Commercial event, I repeated. I invited my son and daughter-in-law for a small family gathering. Mr. Keller, I need to inform you officially. HOA regulations strictly prohibit commercial filming, promotional activities, or ticketed events in private units. Multiple residents have reported noise violations, unauthorized elevator usage, and rooftop pool access by non-residents. The board is authorized to issue an immediate $25,000 fine against your unit. $25,000. That fine attaches directly to the property deed, Glenn said. Through the frosted glass, I watched shadows moving strangers, drinking from my glassware, corporate reps positioning branded products on my counters. My daughter-in-law guiding 2,000 viewers through rooms I'd inhabited for 3 days. Mr. Mercer, I said quietly, I didn't authorize any of this. Silence. Then, sir, we have a record showing that someone called our main office 3 weeks ago inquiring about event capacity limits for private units. The caller identified herself as family and provided your unit number. We assumed you'd authorize the inquiry. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before I'd even moved in. Before I'd posted that photograph. Before I'd agreed to keep it small. Margot hadn't seen an opportunity in my Facebook post. She'd been planning this before I'd ever unlocked my front door. The word commercial hung in the air between Glenn's warning and my comprehension, like a blade waiting to drop. Mr. Mercer, I said into the phone, my voice steadier than I felt. What exactly are you telling me? Sir, we now have 9 noise complaints filed in the last hour. The elevator bank has been completely monopolized for 45 minutes. Building security reports at least 34 individuals have accessed your floor, none of whom are registered guests or residents. Through my study's frosted glass door, I watched shadows moving through my living room. Someone laughed. Music thumped. Margot's voice echoed, still narrating for her audience. The HOA regulations are explicit, Glenn continued. No commercial filming, no promotional activities, no ticketed events in private units. The $25,000 fine attaches directly to the property deed if we determine a violation occurred. $25,000. 3 days after I'd moved in. Mr. Keller, I should also note, Glenn's voice shifted, became more cautious. Our front desk records show that someone called 3 weeks ago inquiring about event capacity limits for private units. The caller identified herself as family and provided your unit number specifically. She asked about noise thresholds, elevator scheduling during events, and rooftop pool guest policies. 3 weeks ago. I hadn't even moved in yet, I said quietly. No, sir. You signed your closing papers on September 25th. This inquiry came in on September 5th, 20 days before I'd owned the property. Before I'd posted that photograph. Before I'd texted, sure, keep it small. Margot hadn't seen an opportunity in my Facebook post. She'd been planning this before I'd ever held the keys. Mr. Mercer, I need to call you back, I said. I ended the call and sat at my study desk, the laptop still open from the morning's email check. My hands moved before my brain fully processed the intention. Browser, search bar. I typed Margot Lives, Lux Eventbrite, Chicago. The top result loaded immediately. My hands froze over the keyboard. Margot Lives, Lux Exclusive Luxury Rooftop Experience, 1 Bennett Park, Chicago. The listing existed. Public. Verifiable. My address weaponized for profit without a single word of consultation. I clicked through. The event page loaded with professional photography. Stock images of champagne flutes, Chicago skyline views, influencer lifestyle aesthetics. But the description made my chest tighten. Join lifestyle curator Margot at her family's exclusive penthouse residence for an intimate morning of luxury living, rooftop access, and networking with Chicago's creative professionals. Experience includes private luxury residence tour, rooftop pool access, panoramic Lake Michigan views, light refreshments, exclusive content opportunities. Her family's exclusive penthouse residence. I read the pricing section. Ticket price $75 per person. Capacity 30 guests. Status sold out. 28 tickets purchased. 28 tickets sold. $75 each. My home, the sanctuary I'd spent 40 years earning, converted into a $2,100 tourist attraction. I did the math twice to be certain. 28 times 75 equaled $2,100. Gross revenue generated from selling access to my private home. My $4.5 million investment reduced to a venue rental Margot had never asked permission to list. The description continued in bullet points. Private luxury residence, 42nd floor, 1 Bennett Park, rooftop infinity pool access, floor-to-ceiling lake views. Meet Margot Lives. Lux in person. Content creation opportunities. Complimentary champagne toast. Content creation opportunities. That explained the ring lights, the tripods, the camera stabilizers. This wasn't a gathering, it was a staged production with paying participants. I scrolled down. Event details. Date and time Saturday, September 28, 10:00 a.m., 1:00 p.m. Location 1, Bennett Park, Chicago. Unit details provided upon ticket confirmation. She'd sold tickets that included my unit details, my exact location, my private address distributed to 28 strangers in exchange for $75 each. I sat in absolute silence for 90 seconds, staring at the screen, calculating the layers of deception. The premeditated call 3 weeks early, the Facebook post that had given her the opening, the text message requesting a small gathering, the ticket sales to 30 strangers, the Instagram live broadcast to thousands. Every piece deliberate, every step calculated. I scrolled to the bottom of the listing looking for terms and conditions, looking for any acknowledgement that this was unauthorized, looking for something that would make the betrayal slightly less complete. Then I saw the final line. Small gray text in the event details section, almost easy to miss. This event is co-organized by Clayton Keller Real Estate Consulting. I stopped breathing. My son's name, not just mentioned, not just referenced, listed as official co-organizer with his business entity attached. Clayton Keller, Real Estate Consulting, the company. He'd suspended operations on 2 years ago after his license lapsed the business. He'd kept registered for tax purposes. The entity he'd told me was dormant. He'd attached his name to this, his business, his professional identity. I wasn't swept along by Margot's scheme. He hadn't been convinced reluctantly. He'd co-organized. The listing said it explicitly. His business entity provided organizational infrastructure for an unauthorized commercial event in his father's home. I read the words 3 times. This event is co-organized by Clayton Keller Real Estate Consulting. My son hadn't been enabler or accomplice. He'd been architect. I thought about the forced casual energy when he'd stepped off the elevator. The dismissive, relaxed dad. The way he'd positioned himself between me and the flood of strangers, blocking my objections. The Instagram live broadcast where he'd stood beside Margot, on camera deliberate, telling 2,000 viewers, yeah, this is the fam. He'd known about the tickets. He'd known about the listing. He'd known his name was printed at the bottom of the page as co-organizer. He'd known everything. Through my study door, I heard his voice in the living room, laughing with strangers who'd paid $75 each to stand in my sanctuary. My son's laughter. My son's conspiracy. My son's professional business entity attached to the systematic exploitation of his 72-year-old father's retirement home. I sat at my desk with the evidence glowing on my laptop screen, realizing I'd raised a man who could commoditize his own father's life savings for $2,100 split with his wife. I needed to confront him. Immediately. With the evidence still visible. With his name still printed in gray text at the bottom of the unauthorized listing. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands didn't shake. The shock had crystallized into something colder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. Clarity, clarity. I stepped out of my study, walked directly to my son through the crowd of strangers occupying my living room, and grabbed his arm hard enough that his drink sloshed onto the imported marble. Dad, Clayton started. We need to talk now, not out there here. I pulled him into the narrow hallway between my study and the main living space, away from Margot's camera, away from the guests who'd paid $75 each to stand in my home. The music thumped through the walls. Someone laughed too loudly in my kitchen. Clayton's face showed confusion, shifting rapidly to wariness. He'd known my tells for 42 years, knew when I was disappointed versus when I was furious. This was neither. This was colder. Dad, what's wrong? You're hurting my... Don't. I held up my phone, the Eventbrite listing still glowing on the screen. Just don't. I watched his eyes move to the screen, scan down, find the line I needed him to see. For a fraction of a second, less than a heartbeat, his eyes shifted away. Left and down. The micro-expression of conscious guilt. That single second told me everything. Explain this to me, I said quietly. Your name is on the Eventbrite listing, as co-organizer. Dad, it's just Margot's thing. She needed a co-organizer name for the platform verification. Clayton. I let the name hang in the air between us. Did you know she sold tickets? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The silence lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds of damning non-answer. I pulled up his Facebook profile on my phone, the app Clayton had helped me set up 3 years ago so I could see photos of his life. I scrolled to his post from 3 days before. Wednesday. 2 days before I'd texted, sure, keep it small. Read this, I said, turning the screen toward him. The post showed a sunset photo of downtown Chicago with custom caption, come check out the fam spot this weekend. Link in Margot's bio. He'd shared the event publicly, actively recruited paying guests, used custom emojis like a promotional advertisement. You promoted this, I said. You didn't just allow it, you marketed it. Clayton's face shifted through expressions too quickly to catalog guilt, defensiveness, desperation, something that looked almost like anger. How many times had I bailed him out at 2030? The failed restaurant venture in Evanston, the real estate speculation that evaporated in 2008, the online fitness app that never launched. And this was how he chose to repay decades of second chances, by selling access to my sanctuary at $75 a head. Dad, we really need the money right now. His voice cracked on, really. The investment went south and I'm down $340,000. I can't lose the house. I can't. I raised my hand. $340,000. The number landed without surprise. Clayton had always been talented at losing money I'd given him and then asking for more to cover the loss. That's enough, I said. You monetized my home, my retirement, for your gambling losses. It wasn't gambling. It was a legitimate real estate syndication. Clayton. My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. Do you understand what you've done? Property management has received 9 noise complaints. They're threatening a $25,000 fine attached to my deed. Your wife is broadcasting my home to thousands of strangers on Instagram Live. You sold tickets to access my private residence 3 days after I moved in. He looked at his shoes. 42 years old and looking at his shoes like a child caught stealing from the register. We thought it would just be quick income, he said quietly. In and out. 3 hours. You never even know the scope. Margot handles events all the time. She knows how to keep things contained. Contained? I gestured toward the living room where music thumped and strangers occupied every surface. There are 34 people in my home. They've monopolized the elevator bank for an hour. Your wife is giving tours of my bedroom on a public live stream. The man standing before me wasn't the boy I'd taught to rebuild carburetors in garage number 1 when he was 14. That boy died somewhere between his MBA and his gambling debts. This version wore expensive clothes, purchased with money. He didn't have promoted fraudulent events to cover losses. He couldn't admit and stood in his father's hallway, with eyes still searching for an angle, still calculating if there was a version of this conversation where he walked away without consequences. I need you to leave, I said, all of you, within the hour. Clayton's head snapped up. Dad, please, we can work this out. No. I turned my back on him, began walking toward the living room. We can't. Not today. Maybe not ever. Dad, I kept walking. Through the crowd of strangers who'd paid to stand on my imported marble, past the ring lights illuminating my kitchen like a television set, past the brand representatives positioning products on my granite counters, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. That's when I saw her. Margot stood on the rooftop pool deck 3 floors above me, visible through the angled glass. She'd changed into a different outfit, white linen pants and a silk tank top that caught the late morning light. 15 paying guests surrounded her in a semicircle. Professional photographer with equipment positioned at the pool's edge, and in her hand raised toward the camera in a toast position was one of my crystal champagne flutes. Baccarat crystal. The set Catherine and I had received for our 30th anniversary from her sister. 8 flutes, still wrapped in tissue paper, still packed in the original boxes with the Baccarat signature stamp visible on the packaging. Still in the moving boxes stacked in my walk-in closet, because I hadn't had 3 days to unpack 30 years of accumulated gifts. She'd gone through my closet, through my moving boxes, unwrapped my memories, and converted them into props for her $75 show. I watched her raise the crystal. Catherine's crystal, our crystal in toast to the paying guests surrounding my rooftop pool. The photographer captured it in burst mode. Margot laughed. The guests raised their phones to photograph her photographing them. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even, but something fundamental shifted in my chest, some weight redistributing from shock into something denser, harder, infinitely more permanent. This wasn't just about money or boundaries or inappropriate commercialization of private space. This was war, and my son had chosen his side. I turned away from the window where Margot raised my crystal in stolen celebration. My phone vibrated. Glenn Mercer. Mr. Keller, we now have 9 noise complaints filed. The elevator bank has been monopolized for over an hour. The board held an emergency phone vote 15 minutes ago. They've authorized an immediate $25,000 fine that attaches directly to the property deed if this commercial event continues. 9 complaints. Emergency board vote. My 3rd day of ownership threatened with a lien I hadn't caused. Give me 15 minutes, I said. Sir, I need to know, what are you planning to do? I looked through my study door at the chaos strangers. Drinking my wine brand representatives, staging product, displays music, thumping through walls built to ensure luxury silence. I'm ending this, I said, now. I walked to the center of my living room, looked at the 34 strangers occupying my sanctuary, and said the words that would ignite a war I never wanted to fight. I need everyone to leave immediately. This event is unauthorized. Please gather your belongings. The room dropped into dead silence. 34 faces turned toward me. Someone's drink stopped mid-sip. The music kept thumping from the rooftop, but in my living room, the performance I was interrupting became suddenly starkly visible. 3 seconds of frozen tableau. Then the murmurs started. Is he serious? I paid $75 for this. Where's Margot? Margot materialized from the rooftop stairwell, phone already raised. I watched her thumb move across the screen. Instagram Live activated instantly. The viewer count surged 400, 700, 1200 within 30 seconds. Guys, she said, voice shaking with calculated precision. I'm literally shaking right now. My father-in-law just walked in and kicked everyone out. In the middle of our celebration. In front of all of you. The camera panned across confused guests, then back to her face. Makeup perfect, expression wounded, performance flawless. Comments scrolled. That's so toxic. Poor Margot. Rich old people are the worst. When wealth makes you forget you have family. Clayton stood directly behind her, silent, paralyzed between father and spouse. His eyes met mine for half a second before sliding away. How does a man become a villain for enforcing property rights in his own home? I turned my back on the performance, walked to my study, locked the door. I dialed 911. First time in 72 years calling law enforcement to my own home. 911, what's your emergency? I need police assistance. People in my home are refusing to leave after being asked. Are you in immediate danger, sir? No, but 34 trespassers are occupying my property after I've ordered evacuation. This was an unauthorized commercial event. Officers are dispatched. Remain secure until arrival. Can you stay on the line? Yes. Through my study. Window. Sirens started faint, but grew steadily louder, approaching justice, cutting through afternoon air. The dispatcher's calm voice in my ear, the muffled chaos through my locked door, and underneath it all, the weight of knowing I'd just crossed a line that would define everything that came after. 2 uniformed Chicago officers entered my unit at 12:35 p.m. Officer Vaughn, the senior Chicago PD officer, who entered with professional authority and 20 years of domestic dispute. Experience in his steady gaze examined my property deed with the kind of thoroughness that meant he knew exactly what he was looking at. Officer Barrett Vaughn's younger partner positioned himself near the elevator bank to ensure orderly evacuation and documented the scene with practiced efficiency. Margot kept her phone aimed at them. 1,200 viewers watching live. "Officers, this is just a family gathering," she said, voice still trembling. "He's having some kind of medical episode. We're worried about him." Officer Vaughn looked at the property deed I held, then at the professional ring lights positioned throughout my kitchen, then at Margot's camera. "Ma'am, the property owner has ordered evacuation. Illinois criminal trespass law is entirely clear. You have 15 minutes to remove belongings or we begin arrests." Margot's thumb moved. The live stream died instantly. Performance ended the moment her audience was stripped away. "This is ridiculous," she said, but the trembling voice was gone. This version was flat cold. "Clayton, get our things." Over the next 15 minutes, 34 people evacuated. Some left silently. Others glared not at me, but at Margot, doubt growing in their expressions as they calculated what they'd paid versus what they'd received. One woman muttered to her companion at the elevator, "Did she really charge us $75 for this?" For the first time since that fatal Facebook post, I wasn't facing this alone. But the officer's departure left a silence more threatening than the chaos they'd ended. The last group gathered at the elevator bank. Clayton passed within 2 feet of me, close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne I'd probably paid for. He leaned in, voice low enough that only I and a nearby resident waiting for the elevator could hear. "You just destroyed this family, Dad. Margot has hundreds of thousands of followers. You have no idea what's coming." The resident, a woman in her 50s holding grocery bags, froze. Her eyes widened. She'd heard it clearly. Every word. Officer Vaughn, still standing near my door, stepped forward. "Sir, did he just threaten you?" Clayton's face went carefully blank. "I was telling my father goodbye." "That didn't sound like goodbye to me," Vaughn said. But Clayton was already stepping into the elevator. Margot beside him, their equipment cases and my crystal champagne flutes stacked on a luggage cart between them. The doors closed. The elevator descended. Officer Vaughn handed me his card. "If they return without permission, call immediately. And Mr. Keller, that threat was clear. If anything escalates, we have this documented." The officers left. The resident with groceries disappeared into her unit, glancing back at me with something between sympathy and concern. I stood alone in my penthouse. Wet footprints tracked across the imported Italian marble from the rooftop pool. Unwashed champagne flutes my baccarat. Crystal Catherine's anniversary gift sat abandoned on granite counters. Professional ring lights stood like sentinels, marking where strangers had staged their content. Empty wine bottles, crumbs ground into my hardwood. The faint smell of too many people occupying space meant for silence. The property was mine again. But Clayton's whispered promise echoed louder than the 34 voices that had violated my sanctuary. "You have no idea what's coming." I walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows. The lake stretched silver and endless. The city continued its Saturday afternoon rhythm, unaware that on the 42nd floor of one Bennett Park, a 72-year-old man had just declared war on his own son. The battle was won, but the war, Clayton's promised war, Margot's digital war, the war I never wanted, had just begun. I spent Saturday night cleaning wet footprints from Italian marble, returning crystal to storage boxes I'd never unpacked, erasing physical evidence of violation. Sunday morning, the digital evidence arrived. The phone started buzzing at 7:15 and didn't stop. 156 notifications. Notifications transforming my bedroom into an execution chamber. I reached for the device on my nightstand, sleep-fogged brain struggling to process the volume before comprehension settled. Cold and sharp, this was Clayton's promised war arriving while I'd slept. Facebook notifications, Instagram tags, text messages, missed calls. All time-stamped after 11:47 p.m. Saturday, all cascading in a torrent that meant something coordinated, something planned, something far worse than random outrage. 156, I said to my empty bedroom. What the hell happened after midnight? I opened Facebook. Margot's post sat pinned at the top of my feed, posted at 11:47 p.m., already gathering momentum like an avalanche. I've been silent long enough. Yesterday, my father-in-law called police on his own family for simply wanting to spend time with him. This man lives entirely alone in a $4.5 million penthouse and couldn't share a single afternoon with the people who love him. My children were so excited to see their grandfather. Instead, they were humiliated in front of total strangers by armed officers. I'm heartbroken. They're heartbroken. This is what wealth does to people. It makes them forget what actually matters. Below the text, a video, heavily edited, 37 seconds showing only me raising my hand, demanding evacuation. No context, no Eventbrite tickets, no live stream, no commercialization, just an old man apparently screaming at loving family members. 156 reactions, 43 shares, comments scrolling, disgusting behavior. Money ruins people. Those poor children. Imagine choosing property over grandchildren. Elder abuse goes both ways sometimes. He needs psychological evaluation. I stopped on one phrase. Read it again. My children were so excited to see their grandfather. Margot had no children with Clayton. She had an estranged teenager from a prior relationship, a boy I'd never met, who lived with his father in Ohio, who wanted nothing to do with her influencer lifestyle. No children had been present at the unauthorized event. No grandchildren existed in my life. She'd fabricated them, manufactured fictional victims to weaponize sympathy. I scrolled further. The pattern emerged with sickening clarity. 8 allied influencer accounts had posted testimonials within a 2-hour window, all between midnight and 2 a.m., all using pre-drafted language with identical emotional structure. Mike's account, Clayton's former college roommate, a fitness influencer with 40,000 followers, posted at 12:17 a.m. Witnessed this firsthand. Drove 4 hours to support family bonding. Got treated like home invaders. The old man screamed at children who just wanted to give him hugs. Absolutely heartbreaking. I'd never screamed. No children had been present during my confrontation with Clayton. Ashley's account, posted at 12:41 a.m. Never seen such selfish behavior in my life. We brought food to share, offered help with housework, just wanted quality family time. Got police called instead. Some people have everything and appreciate nothing. Each lie built on this previous. Each account amplified the narrative through coordinated repetition. 8 accounts, midnight to 2 a.m., pre-drafted language. This wasn't grief or spontaneous outrage. This was a coordinated military strike executed while I slept. I clicked through to a local lifestyle blog that covered Chicago's senior living trends. Article published 6:30 a.m. Blogger must have received a tip overnight. Headline: When Wealth Isolates the Lonely Millionaire of Bennett Park. The article framed me as an isolated elderly man who'd rejected family connection for material comfort. It cited Margot's Facebook post as primary source, quoted multiple witness accounts from the coordinated influencer network, and included speculation about declining mental health in luxury-dwelling seniors. No attempt to contact me for comment. No investigation into whether the claims were accurate. Just syndication of manufactured narrative. The story had been shared 47 times in 90 minutes across Chicago's social networks. I set the phone down, picked it up, set it down again. How do you fight an enemy who controls the story before you know you're under attack? The phone buzzed again. Text message, 7:52 a.m. Mike Brennan. Mike Brennan had worked at my Wicker Park garage for 25 years. Stood as an honorary pallbearer at Catherine's funeral and knew my character better than almost anyone. Still breathing, which made his questioning text all the more devastating. Vernon saw the posts online. I don't know what happened exactly. Are you okay? I stared at the words, read them 3 times. I don't know what happened exactly. Not that doesn't sound like you. Not what's the real story. Not those posts seem suspicious. Just I don't know what happened exactly. A man who'd known me for 25 years, who'd helped me rebuild Catherine's Mustang as a surprise anniversary gift, who'd closed garage number 1 the day she died out of respect, was now asking if I was okay, instead of asking what the hell really happened. Margot's narrative had already colonized the space where his certainty should have been. An email notification appeared. Building Chess Club president. I joined the weekly matches 2 weeks ago, still learning names, still proving I could think strategically after decades of mechanical work. Subject, brief, hiatus suggestion. Vernon, given the current public attention surrounding recent events, perhaps it would be best to take a brief hiatus from our weekly matches. We value community harmony and feel this would benefit everyone involved. We'll reach out when the situation settles. They were asking me to leave. A club I'd joined 14 days ago was suggesting removal before hearing my side of anything. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone growing heavy in my hands, watching my reputation disintegrate in real time across a digital landscape I barely understood. Margot had weaponized victimhood with surgical precision, fabricated grandchildren who didn't exist, edited video that stripped all context, coordinated testimonials from 8 allied accounts, posting identical lies between midnight and 2 a.m., syndicated articles written by bloggers who never contacted me. And now my social ecosystem was collapsing. 25-year friendships questioning my character, 2-week memberships suggesting I disappear. Total isolation achieved in 14 hours. The penthouse I'd spent 40 years earning had become a prison cell with floor-to-ceiling views, and I had absolutely no idea how to fight an enemy who controlled the narrative before I even knew I was under attack. Clayton's whispered promise echoed, "You have no idea what's coming." Now I did. This was what's coming. This digital execution. This systematic destruction. This war fought with screenshots and sympathy and manufactured victims who didn't exist. And I was standing completely alone. I sat alone Sunday evening staring at my phone. Vernon Keller transformed into digital villain by 156 carefully coordinated lies. The silence felt like evidence of guilt. By Tuesday morning, I'd become a ghost. In my own building, visible but deliberately unseen, a 72-year-old man learning what it feels like to be erased from a community in real time. Sunday evening at 8 p.m., I tried to fight back. Simple Facebook post. 3 lines. No anger, no accusations, just facts. I did not reject family. I objected to an unauthorized commercial event where 34 strangers purchased tickets to access my home without my knowledge or consent. I have documentation proving this was a ticketed Eventbrite event. I hit publish, waited. Within 20 minutes, the top comment accumulated 40 likes. Classic gaslighting, trying to make the victim look like the aggressor. This is textbook narcissistic behavior from wealthy abusers. Unbelievable. Other comments piled on. Defensive explanations look petty against emotional appeals. My documentation sounds like excuse-making when measured against fabricated grandchildren who were heartbroken by police. I deleted my own post after 2 hours. Even the truth sounded like a lie when Margot had already written the story. Monday morning, I entered the ground floor coffee shop where I'd spent every morning since moving in. Rachel, the coffee shop manager who'd memorized my order within 3 days and joked about my loyalty to dark roast, now served me with the cold transactional politeness reserved for customers under suspicion. "Morning, Rachel," I said. "The usual, please." "That'll be $4.50. She didn't look up from the register. No smile, no small talk, just mechanical transaction. Tuesday morning, same cold politeness. Wednesday morning, she passed my cup across the counter without meeting my eyes once. 3 weeks ago, she'd known my order before I reached the counter. Now, she couldn't look at my face. The comfortable ritual had been transformed into daily reminder of my new status contamination risk. Tuesday afternoon, I stepped into the elevator headed to 42. A neighbor from the 40th floor entered behind me, caught sight of me, and immediately fixed her eyes on her phone screen. Sudden urgent texting that hadn't existed 3 seconds earlier. Wednesday morning, different neighbor. Same performance. Entered the lobby, made eye contact, then pretended to take an important call. The moment recognition registered. "Oh, sorry, need to take this." Her phone wasn't ringing. She didn't even have it to her ear yet. Thursday morning, a resident actually reversed direction mid-stride when he saw me near the elevators. Chose to take the stairs from the lobby rather than share 42 floors of confined space. I started counting those micro-rejections like inventory. 12 deliberate avoidances in 4 days. 12 people in 4 days. 12 manufactured urgencies. Sudden phone calls that didn't exist. Texts that couldn't wait. I'd become a contaminant in my own building. Wednesday evening email arrived from Chicago Business Executives Association organization. I'd joined 30 years ago when opening garage number 3. Standard October networking gala invitation included a polite postscript. Vernon, given the current public attention and ongoing social media discourse, perhaps it would be best to defer your attendance until these matters settle. We value all our members and want to ensure a comfortable environment for everyone. Not banned, just strongly encouraged to make myself absent. Thursday brought similar message from the building's residential chess club committee. Vernon, we're suggesting a brief pause in your participation for everyone's comfort. We're certain this will resolve soon. 30 years of business association membership, 2 weeks of chess club participation, 6 days of social media accusations. Guess which one mattered more? Friday morning, Mike Brennan's final text arrived. Longer than previous messages. More formal. More final. Vernon, I don't know what's true anymore. A lot of people are talking. People I trust. I need to hear your side directly, but honestly, I'm not sure I'd believe it without proof. That sounds harsh, but after 25 years, you deserve honesty. Call me when you're ready to explain things. Explain things, as if I were the one who needed to justify reality. Mike Brennan wanted me to explain things as if 40 years of documented honesty counted less than 6 days of coordinated lies from a woman whose followers believed she had grandchildren that didn't exist. The man who'd helped me rebuild Catherine's Mustang as a surprise anniversary gift, who'd closed garage number 1 the day she died out of respect, now required documented proof of my innocence. This was rock bottom, when your closest defenders become your prosecutors. I sat in my penthouse Friday evening watching the sun descend over Lake Michigan, painting the watercolors I'd purchased this view to see. The silence had weight now, texture. It pressed against my chest like physical force. No friendly contact in 6 days. No coffee shop small talk. No elevator pleasantries. No institutional welcomes. No allies' certainty. Just silence and spectacular views and the growing understanding that I was fighting a war I had no idea how to win. At 7:30 p.m. a firm, rhythmic knock at my door startled me from the leather chair where I'd been sitting motionless for 20 minutes. I wasn't expecting anyone. Hadn't received a friendly visitor since that fatal Facebook post. No deliveries scheduled. No maintenance requests pending. I approached the security peephole cautiously. Through the fisheye lens stood a woman I'd never seen before. 58 years old, with silver-streaked hair pulled back professionally. Sharp, intelligent eyes behind minimal wire-frame glasses. Wearing a tailored jacket that suggested authority rather than social call. And in her hands, held against her chest like classified intelligence, was a thick manila folder. She looked directly at the peephole, directly at where I stood watching, and something in her expression wasn't pity or judgment. It was sharper, more knowing, almost amused. She adjusted the manila folder and knocked again. Firm, patient, as if she had all the time in the world and knew exactly why she was here. I had no idea who she was, but the folder she carried looked like it contained answers to questions I hadn't even thought to ask yet. I reached for the deadbolt, hesitated, reached again. The woman through the peephole smiled slightly, still looking directly at where I stood as if she could see through the door, and knew I was deciding whether to let her in. She knocked a third time. Same firm rhythm, same patient certainty. I opened the door. While the coffee shop manager refused to meet my eyes, and neighbors took the stairs to avoid me, I spent Monday night alone in my study doing what I'd done for 40 years, documenting the truth with numbers that don't lie. The old steel filing cabinet from my Wicker Park garage office sat in the corner of my study, moved during the transition but never unpacked. Catherine used to tease me about my compulsion. You keep receipts like you're building a criminal case, Vernon. Every transaction documented, every expense filed, every promise archived. Now that compulsion mattered. I unlocked the cabinet at 10 p.m. and began pulling manila folders. 9 years of family help spread across my desk in chronological order. Each folder labeled in my mechanical engineer's block printing dates, amounts, categories. Clayton, MBA tuition. Clayton, wedding venue. Clayton, house down payment. You used to laugh at me for this, I said to Catherine's photo on the bookshelf. You'd understand now. First envelope, Northwestern University MBA program. 2 years. $48,000 total. Clayton's promise still echoed, I'll pay you back when business stabilizes, Dad. Education's investment. Business never stabilized. Second envelope, wedding venue at the Langham, Chicago. $32,000 for a reception Margot demanded, and Clayton couldn't afford. I'd paid it 2 years after Catherine died, telling myself I just wanted my son happy. Third envelope, house down payment in Naperville. $95,000. Described as bridge loan that became permanent gift the moment the wire cleared. I wrote the amounts on a legal pad in my precise engineering script. MBA 48,000, wedding 32,000, house 95,000. I paused, stared at the numbers, reached for the next folder. Investment emergencies. 3 separate wire transfers dated 2021-2022, each labeled margin call or investment shortfall. $65,000, $70,000, $50,000. Total $185,000, preventing Clayton from losing the house during failed market speculation. I remembered each desperate phone call, each promise of repayment, each assurance this was the last time. How does a man give away $680,000 over 9 years without noticing the pattern, one emergency at a time, one promise at a time, one last favor at a time? Next folder, business consulting fees paid to Clayton Keller Real Estate Consulting, the same entity he'd listed as co-organizer on that Eventbrite page. $40,000 for services never actually rendered. His license had been suspended for 2 years. Another folder, midnight panic call last winter. 28,000 wired within an hour. No questions asked. No documentation of reason. Just trust. Just fatherhood. Just the belief that family helps family. I added the numbers. MBA, $48,000. Wedding, $32,000. House, $95,000. Investments, $185,000. Business fees, $40,000. Emergency transfers, $25,000. I pulled my old desktop calculator from the drawer. Mechanical device from garage number 1 that still worked 40 years later. Started inputting amounts with the satisfying mechanical click of each key. Medical emergencies folder, $42,000 across 3 incidents. Miscellaneous temporary loans that were never repaid, $210,000 over scattered requests. I entered the final numbers. The green LED display showed the total with brutal clarity. 9 years. Not a single dollar repaid, despite dozens of promises. Every cent documented with bank receipts, wire confirmations. SMS requests, archived by year in manila folders organized with the same precision I'd used to inventory parts for 40 years. Not $1 repaid, I said to the empty study. Not one promise kept. Not one apology offered. Catherine used to say I kept receipts like a prosecutor building a case. Turns out she was right. I just didn't know I was the victim until I laid the evidence across my desk and saw 9 years of systematic theft masquerading as family loyalty. I opened the final folder. Medical emergencies 2022-2023. Inside, an SMS from Clayton dated October 14 previous year. I remembered this one clearly. It had come during dinner. Ruined my entire evening. Dad, Margot needs surgery immediately. Medical emergency. $15,000, please. I'd wired the money within 90 minutes from my bank app. Emergency surgery. Medical crisis. What kind of a father questions that? I stared at the date. October 14. On impulse, I opened Instagram on my laptop. Searched Margot Lives Lux. Scrolled to October of last year. Found October 14. The post loaded. The post loaded the same Cancun infinity pool I'd discovered Monday night. Same caption. Same geotag. Same timestamp proving she was poolside in Mexico 8 hours after claiming emergency surgery. Simone stared at it in silence. No surgery. No medical crisis. No emergency. Just another lie, archived forever in her own social media hubris. I pulled up my bank records. Wire transfer to Clayton, October 14, 10:34 a.m. $15,000. Memo line, medical emergency. I looked at the Instagram post again. The infinity pool. The cocktail. The yacht. The geotag proving she was in Cancun the same day she claimed to need emergency surgery. She'd been so confident I'd never connect the dots that she'd documented her own fraud for 180,000 followers to see. I sat back in my chair. The study felt very quiet. The lake beyond my windows was black, reflecting nothing. 3 pieces of evidence lay before me. The calculator showing $680,000. Clayton's text begging for emergency surgery money. Margot's Instagram post from the same day, showing her lounging in Cancun with a cocktail and a sunset yacht. Every lie they'd told me was archived somewhere in my filing cabinets, organized by year in their social media feeds, tagged with locations and timestamps in bank records that don't forget or forgive. I'd spent 9 years being an ATM machine with a paternal guilt complex. But I'd also spent 9 years documenting every transaction with the precision of a man who'd run 8 automotive businesses and knew that numbers don't lie the way people do. The evidence was perfect, pristine, irrefutable. But as I sat, surrounded by manila folders and mechanical calculator readouts and Instagram screenshots, I realized I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. The entire city believed I was the villain. Mike Brennan required proof of my innocence after 25 years. The coffee shop manager couldn't look me in the eye. What good was evidence when the jury had already convicted you? What good was evidence when the jury had already convicted you? That question haunted me until a Friday evening when I opened my door expecting nothing and found a woman holding answers I hadn't known to ask for. Mr. Keller, my name is Simone Archer. I live on the 38th floor. She extended her hand, 58 silver-streaked hair, sharp eyes behind wireframe glasses. I've been watching what they're doing to you all week. She placed a heavy manila folder on my foyer table. Inside printed documents, highlighted statutes, archived screenshots organized with tabs. Who are you? Why are you here? Because I prosecuted elder financial exploitation cases for 19 years, and I know the pattern instantly. She met my eyes with the prosecutorial precision I'd spent 40 years identifying in insurance investigators. May I come in? I stepped aside. Simone moved into my living room with authority that made objection unnecessary. She opened the folder on my coffee table, arranging documents with practiced efficiency. Before I took early retirement 3 years ago, I spent 19 years as a senior federal financial crimes prosecutor. Elder exploitation was my specialty, specifically cases where family members systematically drain vulnerable seniors while weaponizing family loyalty as defense. She pulled out Illinois trespass statutes, Chicago HOA regulations, federal wire fraud precedents, every page professionally highlighted and annotated. Why would a federal prosecutor care about a family dispute? Because what your daughter-in-law is doing isn't family drama, Mr. Keller. It constitutes at minimum 3 civil violations and potentially 1 federal criminal count. She tapped the documents. Unauthorized commercial use of private property, sale of access without owner consent. Possible wire fraud since ticket buyers came from Wisconsin. For the first time in 7 days, someone looked at me, not with pity or judgment, but with cold professional assessment of a prosecutor who'd found her smoking gun. I've been documenting this since Saturday. I witnessed the entire event from my balcony, saw the police response, watched the social media attack. I recognized the pattern immediately. She pulled a specific document building visitor log with a familiar signature. I saw her bring corporate brand representatives into this lobby 3 weeks before you even moved in. September 1st. She pointed to the timestamp. You didn't close on this unit until September 24th. She was already scouting your property before you owned it. I stared at the log. September 1st, 2023, 2:47 p.m. Visitor Margot Keller. Purpose event planning consultation. She knew, I said quietly. From the beginning, this wasn't opportunistic greed. This was calculated, premeditated exploitation with corporate partnerships already established. Simone looked at me directly. Which brings me to why I'm here instead of just offering witness testimony. She paused, weighing me. I need you to answer one question honestly. Your answer determines whether I can help you or just offer sympathy. I waited. Do you keep clean financial records, bank statements, wire transfer receipts, text message archives, any documentation of money you've given them over the years? Her tone suggested she'd asked this dozens of times, usually receiving disappointing answers. Most victims don't document their own exploitation. I looked at her for 3 seconds. Then I smiled, small, grim, dangerous. I'm an automotive engineer who built a business empire from one garage. What do you think? I walked to my study, retrieved the filing cabinet key. I've kept meticulous records of every financial transaction for 40 years. My late wife used to tease me, said I documented things like I was building legal cases instead of fixing cars. I opened the study door, revealing organized filing cabinet, legal pads with calculations, spreadsheets cross-referencing dates. Catherine used to laugh at my filing cabinets, my spreadsheets, my compulsion to document everything like I was preparing for audit instead of running a garage. Turns out I was preparing for war, I just didn't know it yet. 9 years of financial assistance totaling $680,000. I pulled out the top folder. Every wire transfer documented with bank-stamped receipts, every text message request archived chronologically, every broken promise recorded. I pulled out another folder. Instagram posts showing luxury purchases made with my emergency funds complete with geotags and timestamps. October 14th, Cancun vacation funded by emergency surgery money. Designer handbags purchased days after roof repair transfers. Simone's expression transformed from hopeful to stunned. Mr. Keller, she said, slowly examining the filing system, most victims I worked with couldn't produce 5% of this paper trail. You have everything. I'm an engineer. I document everything. Some lessons cost $680,000 to learn. For the first time in 7 days, since Clayton's threat, since Mike Brennan questioned my character, since Rachel refused to meet my eyes, I smiled. Not the gracious smile of a generous father-in-law, but the cold, calculated smile of a mechanical engineer who'd just realized his blueprints were perfect and his enemy had been documenting their own fraud, while he'd been documenting every financial crime with forensic precision. Simone looked at my filing cabinet, then at the calculator, still displaying $680,000, then back at me. "Mr. Keller," she said quietly, voice carrying a dangerous edge, "they picked the wrong old man to rob. Most victims I worked with had nothing but memories and broken promises. You have a forensic accountant's dream sitting in that filing cabinet." She smiled too, sharp, knowing, the smile of a federal prosecutor who'd just found a case she could win. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "They're planning another social media offensive this weekend. I saw it mentioned in allied influencer accounts." She pulled out her phone. "We have 3 days to build a case that will survive their digital army and turn their own documented lies into evidence." I looked at my filing cabinet, my spreadsheets, my 9 years of pristine documentation. "Then we better get it started." We got started immediately. By Saturday afternoon, Simone's 38th floor dining table had disappeared beneath 9 years of my financial history, and we were building the kind of case most federal prosecutors spend 6 months assembling, except we had 72 hours before Clayton's social media army regrouped. I'd carried the steel filing cabinet contents down 4 floors in 3 trips. Simone had converted her dining room into command center, dual laptops, legal pads, industrial scanner, coffee pot that looked military grade. The conference table vanished beneath organized chronological stacks labeled by year. Most victims I prosecuted for had a shoebox full of random papers. Simone said, examining the organization, "You've built a forensic accountant's filing system that would make FBI investigators jealous. 40 years running the business taught me documentation beats memory every time. Your compulsion to document everything just became their death sentence." Simone opened Excel, created a spreadsheet with headers: date, amount, purpose claimed, bank confirmation, repayment status. I began reading aloud from receipts while she typed. MBA tuition $48,000, Northwestern University 2-year program. Repayment status: never. Wedding venue $32,000, Langham, Chicago. Repayment: never. House down payment $95,000. We worked through the stacks methodically. Investment bailouts spanning 2021-2022, $65,000, $70,000, $50,000. Business consulting fees $40,000. Emergency transfers $28,000. Medical emergencies $42,000. Miscellaneous temporary loans $210,000. Simone's spreadsheet auto-calculated the final row. Total $680,000. "Matches your Monday night calculation exactly," she said. .00. She exported the file to PDF, timestamped it, created 3 backup copies. "This document is now exhibit-grade evidence. Every number triple verified against bank records with routing numbers and timestamps. $680,000. 23 luxury purchases. 3 years of systematic fraud, and every single piece of evidence documented by the criminals themselves through their own social media vanity." Simone opened her second laptop, pulled up Margot's public Instagram archive, her lifestyle influencer account with 180,000 followers, 3 years of posts timestamped and geotagged. "Give me the SMS dates of her emergency requests." I read from my phone's archived messages, while Simone created a split-screen comparison. Left side showed my bank wire, right side showed Margot's Instagram from the same week. October 14th, 2022. $15,000 for emergency surgery. Simone typed the date into Instagram's search. The post loaded. Infinity pool overlooking turquoise water. Luxury cocktail with paper umbrella. Private yacht at sunset. Geotag Cancun, Mexico. Caption: Cancun reset. Sometimes you just need to breathe. Posted 6:47 p.m. October 14, 8 hours after receiving my emergency surgery money. Simone stared at the dual screens in complete silence for a full minute. She documented her own fraud for 180,000 followers, she finally said. Posted it with geotags and timestamps like she was daring someone to notice. $15,000 for surgery that never happened. She was so confident you'd never check that she tagged the resort, the yacht company, and the cocktail bar. The pattern repeated methodically. April 2021, $4,200 for car repair emergency. 4 days later, Instagram showed new Chanel handbag with price tag visible in mirror selfie. August 2021, $8,500 for credit card crisis. 1 week later, Milan first-class tickets and luxury hotel room service photographs. January 2022, $6,800 for medical copay. Sedona luxury spa retreat post within 10 days. March 2023, $11,000 for roof damage. designer furniture delivery photos tagged with store locations. Simone created a matching matrix on her spreadsheet, 23 separate instances where emergency fund requests aligned within 14 days of major luxury Instagram posts. Not coincidence. Systematic pattern spanning 36 months. Every emergency was a vacation fund, Simone said. Every crisis was a shopping spree, and she documented all of it publicly like a trophy collection. I'd spent Monday night alone discovering the scope of their betrayal. Now Saturday afternoon, I was watching a federal prosecutor transform my grief into a weapon, and realizing that my obsessive documentation habits had accidentally built their prison. 23 times, I said. 23 separate lies I believed because I trusted family. Simone closed the laptop and looked at me with an expression that suggested she'd seen something beyond the Instagram timeline. There's something off about Clayton's professional timeline, she said. Your son claims to operate a real estate consulting business, but his cash desperation doesn't match legitimate broker income. The amounts you're describing, $340,000 in investment bailouts alone, that's not standard market downturn. That's systematic loss. She pulled out her phone, dialed a number from memory. I need a favor. Professional license verification through Illinois IDFPR database. Clayton Keller Real Estate Broker, Chicago Metro. She put the call on speaker. 3-minute hold. Bureaucratic hold music filled her dining room. I watched Simone's face as her colleague came back on the line and began reading results. Her expression shifted from curious to grim to something darker recognition. Her eyes met mine across the table. We need to see this screen together, she said, right now. She ended the call, opened her laptop to the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation database, typed Clayton's name. The record loaded. License status. Suspended effective date. March 1, 2023. Duration 6 months. Reason material. Misrepresentation in transaction involving elderly client. Failure to disclose conflicts of interest. Violation of fiduciary duty to vulnerable party. I stared at the screen. My son's real estate broker license wasn't just inactive. It was suspended for exploiting an elderly client. And during his active suspension, when he legally couldn't practice, he'd presented himself as a real estate consultant while systematically draining his 72-year-old father. He has a documented legal history, Simone said quietly. This isn't his first elderly victim. You're just the one who happened to be related to him. The room felt very quiet. The afternoon sun through Simone's windows painted gold across the spreadsheet, showing $680,000 in systematic exploitation. The man I raised, I said slowly, has a state-documented pattern of elder exploitation. Simone looked at me across the table with an expression that said, we'd just moved from family dispute into criminal pattern territory. And during his suspension, she said, he illegally operated a business entity, attached it to a commercial event in your home, and continued the exact behavior that got him suspended in the first place. I'd thought I understood the depth of betrayal. I'd been wrong. I'd thought I understood the depth of betrayal. Then Simone pulled up the full Illinois IDFPR database record, and I understood I'd been raising a predator without knowing it. The screen glowed with bureaucratic precision. White background state seal, and my son's name attached to words like suspended and elderly client exploitation. Clayton Keller, license number 471.0238841. Licensed real estate broker. Simone read aloud while I stared at the screen. Status suspended. Effective date March 1st, 2023. Duration 6 months. Reason material misrepresentation in a transaction involving an elderly client. I read that final line 3 times. Involving an elderly client. My son had been legally stripped of his livelihood for exploiting an isolated senior. Then he'd spent the next 6 months running the identical playbook on his own father during his active suspension while he was legally prohibited from practicing. He presented himself as a real estate consultant to you, Simone said. That's illegal practice of suspended credentials. Every dollar he received from you during that suspension period constitutes criminal fraud. The sun through Simone's windows painted gold across the spreadsheet, showing $680,000. This isn't his first time, I said. This is his method. Simone scrolled down the database record. Her finger stopped on an additional entry I hadn't seen. November 2022, she said. 4 months before the suspension, warning issued, concern raised regarding client communication practices with vulnerable populations. 4 months before suspension, a full year before I'd even bought the penthouse. I was flagged by the state board a year earlier, Simone continued. The March suspension wasn't sudden punishment. It was final enforcement after he ignored the warning. The pattern spanned at least 18 months of documented exploitation before I'd ever posted that fatal Facebook photograph. My son didn't become a desperate criminal overnight. He'd been operating this way for years while I wrote checks believing the family narrative. When does a boy who rebuilt carburetors at 12 become a man who rebuilds lies at 42? Is it sudden transformation or slow erosion, visible only in hindsight? I sat back from the screen and looked at Catherine's photo on Simone's bookshelf. I'd placed it there earlier when carrying down my filing cabinet contents. Small silver frame. Her smile from our 30th anniversary weeks before the cancer diagnosis that would kill her within 18 months. She'd loved Clayton fiercely when he was a boy, always laughing, always seeking approval, showing that mechanical aptitude I'd been so proud of. I taught him to rebuild carburetors at garage number 1 when he was 12 years old. The kid had talent, genuine patience for precision work. Catherine used to say he had my engineering brain and her people skills, perfect combination for success in any field he chose. When did that boy die? When did the mechanical precision become a tool for exploitation instead of repair? You loved him so fiercely, I said to her photo. You said he had my brain and your heart. When did the heart stop working? Vernon, Simone said quietly, this isn't your fault. Predators learn to mimic empathy. It's their greatest skill. I taught him precision at 12 years old, I said. He used that precision to rob me at 42. I traced the timeline backward in my mind, looking for the moment of transformation. MBA 2015-2017, the first money request started during graduate school. Small amounts at first. Tuition gaps. Emergency expenses, always temporary. Wedding 2019, Margot entered the picture. Financial requests accelerated immediately. Venue costs, honeymoon expenses, furniture for their new home. 2021, investment failures during pandemic. Desperation became visible, but I'd attributed it to market chaos everyone was experiencing. 2022, state board warning that Clayton never mentioned to me. Just intensified the extraction instead. March 2023, suspension. He still didn't confess. Simply rebranded himself as consultant and continued. September 2023, my penthouse purchase. Clayton saw opportunity for massive score. Each stage, my son chose deeper deception over honesty. Character isn't destroyed suddenly. It erodes through 1,000 small compromises until only facade remains. The man I'd confronted in my hallway wasn't a transformed good son. It was what had always been there once I stopped projecting hope onto emptiness. MBA 2015, first request started, I said aloud, organizing it like an engineering problem. Wedding 2019. Margot arrived, requests accelerated. Warning 2022, he hid it from me. Suspension 2023, rebranded as consultant. You're looking for the moment he changed, Simone said. There may not be one. Some people learn early that family loyalty is exploitable resource. Catherine died, believing our son would take care of me in my old age. She never knew that her death freed him to start the extraction. In earnest. No more maternal oversight, no more accountability. Just an aging father, too trusting to see the predator wearing his son's face. I kept hoping if I supported him enough, he'd become the man I thought he was, I said. I was funding the lie. Simone closed her laptop and faced me across the table, covered in evidence of 9 years of systematic fraud. We need a specialist field investigator, she said. Someone who knows how to extract hidden assets and digital exploitation trails. The 23 Instagram matches are devastating, but there's more. I can feel it. Bank accounts we haven't found. Business entities registered under aliases. Other victims he's targeted. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts. I know exactly the right person. Former Chicago PD detective who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. If Clayton has a deeper pattern, this investigator will find it. I looked at the evidence fortress we'd built in 6 hours. Pristine documentation, forensic spreadsheets, Instagram cross-references, state licensing records, and realized we were still only seeing the surface. More than $680,000, I asked. More than 23 luxury purchases. More than a suspended license for elder abuse. Yes, Simone said simply. Serial predators don't stop at one victim. If he exploited an elderly client badly enough to earn state suspension, there are others. We need to find them. She scrolled through her contacts, stopping on a name I couldn't quite read from across the table. This investigator specializes in digital forensics and asset recovery. He's pulled hidden bank accounts, shell corporations, offshore transfers. that prosecutors didn't even know to look for. If Clayton has other victims, if Margot's running side operations, if there's money hidden beyond what we've documented, he'll find it. She looked up at me. The question isn't whether there's more, Vernon. The question is how much more. By Monday afternoon, we had our answer. Conrad Travers laid out 300 printed screenshots across his desk, like evidence at a murder trial. Conrad Travers, mid-50s, former IRS investigator, turned private detective with the methodical and flappable demeanor of someone who'd spent 30 years turning financial chaos into prosecutable patterns, gestured to the evidence covering every flat surface in his sparse Chicago office. 847 Instagram posts over 3 years, he said. I've compiled, cross-referenced, and time-stamped every single one. Simone and I sat across from his desk. Institutional fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across the printed images. Margot at infinity pools. Designer boutiques, luxury restaurants. Each photo tagged with locations, dates, price points. Influencer marketing isn't illegal, Conrad said. But what your daughter-in-law documented here is systematic fraud architecture. She didn't just spend your money, she built a personal brand on your financial exploitation and monetized it for 3 years. He pulled specific examples, laid them side by side with my bank records. September 2021. Clayton texts you, roof emergency structural damage, 48,000 needed immediately. You wire the money same day. He slid the bank receipt across. 13 days later, Margot posts this. Chanel handbag. Price tag visible in mirror selfie, $6,200. Caption, treat yourself energy, Amber Chanel, luxury life, worth it. March 2022, HVAC system crisis. 63,000 for emergency replacement before summer heat. Another bank receipt. 10 days later, Paris. First-class Air France tickets visible on her tray table. Eiffel Tower suite. Michelin-starred restaurant, luxury hotel room service. Caption, Paris energy hits different. Every emergency request matches a luxury purchase within 14 days, Conrad said. Not sometimes, every single time. The correlation is mathematically impossible as coincidence. She tagged every item, every location, every price point, Simone said, examining the posts. She built your financial exploitation into her personal brand. She monetized his suffering, I said quietly. Conrad nodded. For 3 years, your home and your money were her content creation infrastructure. And she documented all of it publicly with geotags and timestamps like she never imagined anyone would connect the dots. I noticed a wedding photo on Conrad's desk, 30 years married, based on the inscription. Still together, still smiling. Sharp contrast to watching my son's wife systematically document the calculated betrayal of family trust for 180,000 followers. There's more, Conrad said. He pulled a different folder. Your case isn't just about Instagram vanity. There's a secondary financial layer you didn't know existed. He opened a printout showing Venmo transaction history tied to an LLC I'd never heard of. Margot operated an undisclosed, limited liability company receiving brand sponsorships through Venmo. $94,000 in undocumented income over 18 months. $94,000. The brands paid her directly, Conrad continued, not through official Instagram channels with tax reporting. She structured it deliberately through Venmo transfers to an LLC registered under a variation of her maiden name. Every payment was for content created, using your home as a backdrop, your furniture, your views, your property without your permission or disclosure. She used my home as her studio, I said, and kept every dollar hidden. 94,000 in brand partnerships, Simone said. On top of the 680,000 from Vernon, that's 774,000 in total exploitation. Conrad closed that folder and pulled another. His expression shifted, something darker than professional detachment. There's something else you need to see. A civil complaint filed in Naperville 2019. He slid the document across. Plaintiff, name redacted. Defendant Margot Hayes, her maiden name before marrying Clayton. Claims unauthorized filming in private residence, financial exploitation, through fabricated emergencies, commercial use of elderly person's property without consent. Elderly male victim, 74 years old at time of filing, Conrad said. Nearly identical pattern to your situation. She befriended him through a church group, gained access to his home, began filming lifestyle content. When he discovered it and objected, she'd already monetized his property for 14 months. You're not her first victim, Simone said. I momentarily imagined finding that Naperville victim in 2019. Having one conversation preventing my entire nightmare through a single warning, the NDA made legally impossible. How many disasters could be avoided if the silenced were allowed to speak? The plaintiff's attorney got him $50,000 in settlement, Conrad continued, but the agreement included strict non-disclosure clause. He legally can't warn anyone about what happened. The case file is sealed. I only found it through a specialized legal database search. She learned from that case, I said. She refined her methods. Your case shows sophisticated evolution, Conrad confirmed. In Naperville, she was caught filming without permission. With you, she manufactured a family event to create plausible access. In Naperville, she monetized through basic Instagram posts. With you, she added ticketed Eventbrite events and corporate brand partnerships. She didn't just repeat the pattern, she improved it. The NDA architecture is deliberate, Simone said. It creates warning systems that legally can't function. The first victim gets paid to stay silent, enabling the second victim to walk into identical trap. She clearly received legal coaching after Naperville, Conrad said. Your son's real estate background, even suspended, provides legitimacy layer. The corporate partnerships add professional veneer. The family narrative creates emotional defense. She built insulation at every level. I looked at the evidence, 847 Instagram posts documenting 3 years of exploitation, 94,000 in hidden Venmo income, a prior victim legally prohibited from warning me, a daughter-in-law who transformed elder exploitation into refined criminal enterprise. You're not her opportunistic first attempt, Conrad said quietly. You're her perfected second victim. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out one final document, slid it across the table. A name, an address, a phone number, the Naperville victim. His NDA prevents him from coming forward, Conrad said, but it doesn't prevent him from answering questions if you call. I stared at the paper. One phone call could provide testimony proving systematic predation. One phone call could also destroy my case if it violated his legal agreement and gave Margot's lawyers grounds for dismissal. The question now, Conrad said, is whether that Naperville victim will risk violating his NDA to help you. I picked up the paper, folded it carefully, put it in my pocket. Some questions require answers, even when asking them is dangerous. Some questions require answers, even when asking them is dangerous. But Sunday night at 9 p.m., standing alone on my freezing balcony, I realized I wasn't going to ask a question, I was going to deploy a weapon. I stood on the balcony, watching my breath, crystallized phone screen, glowing on a name I hadn't dialed in 6 years. Not the Naperville victim's contact Conrad had given me. That paper sat folded in my desk drawer, untouched. Calling that number meant legal risk, NDA violations, potential case destruction. I scrolled to a different name instead. Lester Redmond, 40 years. I'd built my reputation on never asking favors, never calling in debts, never leveraging the goodwill I'd accumulated through decades of elite automotive restoration work. When you're the man who saves collectible cars that other mechanics declare unsalvageable, you accumulate a certain kind of capital in Chicago's power circles. I'd restored Lester's 1967 fastback Mustang in 2008, pulled it from a barn in Wisconsin, where it had sat rotting for 15 years, rebuilt the engine from seized block, fabricated parts that hadn't been manufactured since 1973. Took me 8 months. He'd offered to pay triple my quote. I'd charged him exactly what I quoted. He'd said, if the world ever turns completely sideways, call this number first. 6 years later, the world had turned sideways. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Vernon Keller. His voice carried recognition and immediate concern. 6 years. Must be category 5. My daughter-in-law has a prior victim with an NDA. I need the kind of attention that doesn't announce itself. Lester Redmond, retired FBI Chicago tactical director, mid-60s. The kind of man who'd spent 30 years building networks most people don't know exist, went silent for 3 seconds. You're cashing in 40 years of goodwill, he said. Tell me everything. I told him. Clinical terms. No emotion. Systematic exploitation spanning 9 years. Prior elderly victim in Naperville, 2019. Identical pattern. NDA sealed settlement. Hidden Venmo, LLC with 94,000 in undisclosed sponsorship income. Instagram documentation of luxury purchases funded by my emergency transfers. Son's suspended real estate license for elder exploitation. Current social media campaign painting me as villain. Lester asked precise questions. Dollar amounts. Interstate activity. Digital evidence trails. 94,000 in undisclosed sponsorships. Using your property as studio. His tone shifted from friendly to operational. That's commercial activity without consent. Potential wire fraud if any interstate commerce involved. Wisconsin ticket buyers, I said. Corporate brand partnerships across state lines. She documented the exploitation publicly. 847 Instagram posts. Geotagged, timestamped, monetized. Before I tell you what machinery Lester activated with that single phone call, if you're still with me, comment. A, if you think Vernon should have told Simone about this call, or B, if keeping it secret was the right move, and add one reason in 5-10 words, so I can see how you're reading this strategy. A quick note, what follows contains some recreated details for narrative depth and emotional impact. The lesson is what matters most. October, wind off Lake Michigan, cut through my jacket. Same wind that used to mean winter prep work at the garage satisfied exhaustion. After long days now just meant standing in cold, waiting for invisible machinery to move. I know 3 people who want this file on their desk by Wednesday, Lester said. Federal prosecutors who specialize in elder exploitation with interstate commerce angles. They won't call you directly. You'll just see results investigators appearing asking questions she can't anticipate. No official contact, I asked. None. This moves through informal inquiry channels first. If the pattern holds up under initial review, it escalates automatically. Your documentation will do most of the work. How long? You'll see movement within 10 days. Won't have my fingerprints, won't have yours. Just federal attention landing exactly where it needs to land. I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, not satisfaction, just the cold recognition that I'd finally deployed the right weapon after weeks of fighting with tools I didn't understand. Lester, I appreciate. You earned this 6 years ago when you saved my fastback from the scrap heap. Every shop in Illinois told me it was hopeless. You spent 8 months making it perfect. Now we're even. The call lasted 14 minutes total. When it ended, I stood on the balcony for another 3 minutes, watching the city lights reflect off the dark lake. I realized I'd just traded 40 years of cultivated independence for one phone call, and it didn't feel like loss. It felt like finally using the right tool for the job. Some problems require precision instruments. Some require federal prosecutors. I stepped back inside. Simone looked up from the couch where she'd been reading her wire-frame glasses, catching the lamplight. Everything okay out there? She asked. Just needed some air, I said, ready for bed. She studied me for half a second. The kind of look a federal prosecutor gives when she knows there's more to the story but decides not to push. See you in the morning, she said, returning to her book. I walked to my bedroom, changed for sleep, lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Simone had no idea federal machinery was already turning. No idea that within 10 days, investigators would appear asking Margot questions she couldn't possibly anticipate. No idea I'd just activated a network she didn't know I had access to. Some weapons worked best in complete darkness. Some debts were meant to be called after 40 years of patience, and some wars required deploying forces the enemy never saw coming. I closed my eyes and waited for the machinery to move. The federal courthouse stood like a monument to accountability. All glass and granite designed to make liars uncomfortable. Monday morning, October 14th, 9 o'clock sharp. Simone and I walked through security with a filing box that contained 3 years of my life reduced to exhibits. You're certain about this timing? Simone asked as we rode the elevator to the clerk's office. Once this complaint is public record, there's no walking it back. That's the point, I said. The elevator doors opened. Federal dockets don't lie. Let people verify for themselves. The clerk. A woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain took our filing with professional efficiency. Civil case number 123CV07841. Keller v. Keller et al. Federal complaint alleging wire fraud. Elder financial exploitation conversion of assets. 18 pages of facts, 23 exhibits, and a prayer for relief that included treble damages. You'll receive your stamped copies within the hour, the clerk said. Pacer upload typically processes by noon. That gave me 3 hours. We walked back to the parking garage. Simone thought we were heading home to wait for the media cycle to catch up with the federal filing. She didn't know I'd already written the Facebook post, timed it to go live at 9:47 a.m. exactly when the courthouse filing would hit the system, but before Pacer made it searchable. Drop me at that coffee shop on Jefferson, I told her. I need to take care of something. She gave me a look. Vernon, what did you do? Nothing illegal, I said, which was true. I'd simply decided that Margot's monopoly on public narrative needed competition. The post went live while I was ordering a black coffee. No emotion, no appeals to sympathy. Just data, federal lawsuit, Filed this morning, U.S. District Court, Northern District of Illinois, case number 123CV07841. Allegations include systematic financial exploitation 2020-2023. Supporting evidence Eventbrite records showing $847,000 in event payments screenshots attached. Instagram geolocation data, cross-referenced with claimed business expenses. Analysis attached. Bank statements showing $290,000 in unexplained transfers, redacted account numbers, full amounts visible. Federal docket will be searchable via Pacer by noon today for independent verification. I attached 12 images, every Eventbrite screenshot. The Instagram geolocation comparison showing Margot at a Cancun resort the same week. Clayton claimed $8,400 in business development expenses. The bank statements with my amateur highlighter work showing the pattern. Then I turned off my phone and drank my coffee. What does it feel like to watch the truth do your fighting for you? Like sitting in a quiet coffee shop while the world outside catches fire. Like knowing you've built something that doesn't need you to defend it anymore. I gave it 90 minutes before checking. Simone called 4 times. My phone showed 340 Facebook comments and 89 private messages. I opened the comment thread. The first 20 comments were Margot's usual defenders. This is elder abuse of Margot. Vernon is a narcissist. He's weaponizing the legal system because he can't control her anymore. But then the verification started. Comment from Helen Pritchard, retired paralegal. Just searched Pacer. Case number checks out. Filing timestamp 9:14 a.m. today. Complaint is public record. This isn't a hoax. Comment from David Wu, CPA. I ran the Eventbrite math. If those screenshots are accurate, $847K in event revenue, with 0 vendor payments and 0 tax reporting, is textbook structuring. This isn't a family dispute. This is fraud. Comment from Sarah Kozlow, someone I'd never met. I cross-checked the Instagram geolocations with the dates on those expense reports. She was literally posting from a beach in Mexico while claiming business development in Chicago. How is anyone defending this? The defenders got quieter. The verification comments multiplied. People were doing their own research, checking federal records, running their own calculations. Margot's narrative required them to trust her. Mine simply required them to look. Comment 287 from Jennifer Aldridge. I've known Margot for 8 years. I wanted to believe her. But I just spent an hour verifying these documents, and they all check out. Vernon isn't lying. She is. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. That one hit different. Not vindication, something quieter. The knowledge that truth doesn't need volume when it has evidence. By 11:30, the comment thread had turned into a public excavation. People were finding things I hadn't even posted. Old Instagram stories Margot had deleted, but someone had archived Yelp reviews from her events that contradicted her claimed business model, LinkedIn connections that raised questions about who she'd really been working with. The internet, it turns out, is very good at crowdsourced forensic accounting when you give it a reason to look. I called Simone. You published the evidence, she said, not a question. People have a right to verify facts, I said. Federal dockets are public record. I just made it easier for them to find. Vernon, there are 300 comments systematically destroying Margot's credibility. 340, I corrected. Last I checked. Silence on her end. Then, you did this deliberately. Timed the post to go live before the docket was searchable, so people would have to work to verify it themselves. People trust what they discover, I said, not what they're told. Another pause. You're scarier than I thought. I finished my coffee, threw away the cup, walked outside into October sunlight that felt like vindication and justice, and something colder. The knowledge that I'd just proven Margot had underestimated exactly the wrong 72-year-old mechanic. But the strangest thing was what didn't happen. No response from Margot. No response from Clayton. Their Facebook pages stayed silent. No defensive posts, no counter-narrative, no frantic damage control. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean surrender. The kind that means they're planning something I haven't seen yet. The call I'd been dreading came Tuesday morning, except it wasn't Margot launching a counterattack. It was her Naperville defense counsel asking for a settlement conference. Mr. Keller, this is Jonathan Webb from Hartfield and Associates, the voice said. Professional careful. I represent the firm involved in the prior Naperville matter. My clients believe expedited resolution serves everyone's interests. Would you consider a preliminary settlement discussion? I put the phone on speaker so Simone could hear. She looked as confused as I felt. We filed 48 hours ago, I said. Why the urgency? Let's just say the landscape has shifted significantly. Webb's tone was conciliatory, almost desperate. Early mediation often produces outcomes that litigation cannot. I told him I'd discuss it with counsel and ended the call. Simone was already pulling up her tablet, scrolling through case precedents. That's incredibly rare, she said. Defense firms don't request settlement conferences 3 days after filing. They stall, they file motions to dismiss, they fight jurisdiction. They don't call asking to negotiate. So what changed? She shook her head. I have no idea. My phone rang again, 90 minutes later. Lester Redmond. I thought you'd want to know what happened, he said without preamble. I made one call Monday afternoon. Didn't mention your name. Just asked an old contact at Brennan Carruthers' elite Chicago corporate litigation firm if certain influencer sponsorship arrangements might constitute wire fraud under the current regulatory environment. I felt something cold settle in my chest, and Brennan Carruthers made 3 calls of their own. Informal inquiries into Margot's corporate sponsors. Nothing aggressive, just questions. Who verified the engagement metrics? Were the endorsement disclosures FTC compliant? Had anyone audited the revenue sharing arrangements? Simone was watching me. I put Lester on speaker. The Naperville defense firm got wind of federal level scrutiny, Lester continued. Held a 45-minute emergency meeting yesterday afternoon. Decided immediate settlement was better than extended exposure. And they folded in 36 hours, I asked. Nobody wants federal attention on influencer monetization right now, Vernon. The regulatory environment is already hostile. One formal inquiry from the FTC or SEC and every brand partnership Margot has gets audited. The Naperville firm is trying to contain the blast radius before it reaches their other clients. I realized then what Lester had actually deployed. Not a legal weapon. An invisible one. The ghost network operated like foundation, settling invisible pressure applied in darkness, causing visible cracks everywhere, structural failure, spreading before anyone understood why. Thank you, I said quietly. You restored my Mustang, Lester said. This is what I restore. By Tuesday afternoon, Margot's silence had ended, but not with strategy, with panic. Simone found it first. A document posted to Margot's Facebook page, formatted to look like a legal brief, but reading like desperate fiction. She's claiming the penthouse was a family residence, giving her publicity rights to interior documentation. Simone read from the screen. That your assets were joint family property she had a right to monetize for household benefit. That your complaint constitutes elder abuse by a controlling patriarch. I looked at the screen. The document cited case law that didn't apply legal theories that didn't exist, property rights that contradicted public records. It's titled solely in my name, I said. Has been since 1987. She's fabricating legal theory. Simone's expression was somewhere between amazement and satisfaction. Vernon, she just handed you proof of conspiracy. She's not consulting attorneys anymore. She's spiraling, making it worse. I saved a copy, filed it with our evidence folder, watched Margot dig the hole deeper. The first corporate domino fell at 4 o'clock. Baker Fine Furniture, one of Margot's premium sponsors. The brand that had paid her $18,000 to feature their sectional sofa in lifestyle posts, published a termination notice on their official Instagram account. We regret to announce the discontinuation of our partnership with lifestyle influencer Margot Keller, effective immediately. This decision reflects a misalignment with company values and recent disclosures that require us to protect brand integrity. We remain committed to authentic partnerships with creators who share our ethical standards. They see the federal docket, I said. They're protecting their brand before the association costs them customers. Simone refreshed the post. It's starting, Vernon. The corporate exodus. I felt something cold and triumphant settle in my chest. Not joy, something quieter. The knowledge that I'd built a mechanism that would run without me now. Wednesday morning, the dominoes fell faster. Maison Lumiere. Skincare terminated. Their partnership had been worth $23,000 annually. Gone. Meridian Luxury Escapes canceled a $47,000 brand collaboration for an influencer vacation series. Contracts voided for cause citing reputational risk and material misrepresentation. By noon, Simone was tracking the follower count on Margot's Instagram like a forensic accountant. 34,000, she said. She's lost 34,000 followers in 42 hours. How many does she have left? 81,000, but the engagement rate is collapsing. People are commenting on old posts, asking if the fraud allegations are true. Regional influencers are publicly distancing themselves. I thought about restoration work. How once structural integrity fails, collapse accelerates exponentially. Each failure triggers the next. Weight redistributes to weakened supports until the whole system gives way. Her entire income stream is frozen, Simone said quietly. Every monetization channel, every brand partnership, every affiliate link, it's all collapsing in real time. I should have felt vindication. Instead, I felt something colder. The knowledge that I'd proven exactly what happens when someone mistakes a 72-year-old mechanic's patience for weakness. My phone rang again at 12:15. Not Lester this time, not defense counsel. Conrad Travers. Vernon, I just got off the phone with the Naperville victim, Conrad said. His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before, urgency mixed with something that sounded like hope. He's willing to testify, despite the NDA, despite the risks. He wants to stop her from doing this to anyone else. I looked at Simone. She'd heard. When can we meet him? I asked. Clayton raised his right hand at 9:04 a.m., swore to tell the truth, and began destroying his marriage within 11 minutes. The deposition suite was corporate neutral, beige walls, conference table, stenographer in the corner recording every word for federal record. 2 weeks had passed since Conrad's call about the Naperville victim. 2 weeks of preparation, document organization, and watching Margot's remaining sponsors flee like rats from a sinking ship. Now we sat across from my son and his wife while their defense attorney, Thomas Brightwell, mid-50s senior partner at Hartfield and Associates, with silver hair and increasingly desperate eyes, tried to control testimony he clearly knew would implode. Simone opened with Clayton, methodical, clinical. Were you aware your wife operated an undisclosed LLC receiving brand payments? She asked. Clayton's hands were folded on the table. Careful posture, rehearsed answers. I knew she had sponsorship deals, he said. I didn't know the financial architecture, but you facilitated emergency contractor invoices that preceded her luxury purchases by 14 days on 3 separate occasions. Silence. Clayton glanced at Margot. She was watching him like a predator watches prey that might run. I processed invoices my father requested, Clayton said finally. I didn't track what happened afterward. The entry twist came smooth as glass. Clayton was admitting awareness of the exploitation scheme, the contractor, cover the timing coordination while claiming strategic ignorance about Margot's hidden accounts. Minimizing his culpability, implicating his wife. Margot's jaw tightened. Simone shifted targets. Mrs. Keller, did you disclose the Venmo LLC income to your father-in-law? Margot leaned forward, defensive energy crackling off her like static electricity. Family dynamics don't require formal disclosure for shared household documentation, she said. The language sounded rehearsed, probably fed to her by Brightwell during prep. It wasn't your household, Simone said quietly. The penthouse is titled solely in Vernon's name. You were a guest. I was family, Margot snapped. I had implied consent through family relationship dynamics. Did Vernon ever give explicit permission to monetize his property and personal life? He didn't object, because he didn't know. Simone slid an exhibit across the table. Bank statements showing the transfers. You concealed the revenue. You structured payments through an LLC he'd never heard of. That's not implied consent. That's fraud. Brightwell interrupted. My client maintains that. Your client is contradicting her husband's testimony, Simone said. Clayton claimed he didn't know about the LLC. Margot claims family transparency. Both can't be true. I watched my son and daughter-in-law destroy each other under oath and felt nothing. Just clinical satisfaction that the machinery was working exactly as designed. No grief, no anger. Just the cold knowledge that I'd built something that would grind them down to component parts and leave the truth visible in the wreckage. Simone pressed harder. Mrs. Keller, your husband, testified he was unaware of the financial architecture. Were you operating this scheme without his knowledge, or was he lying under oath? Margot's composure cracked. She turned on Clayton with the fury of someone watching their escape route close. He specifically instructed me to target his father because the old man didn't understand digital media and wouldn't notice the monetization, Margot said. Her voice was sharp, desperate. This was his idea. I was just executing his strategy. The room went silent. Clayton stared at his wife. I watched devotion shatter in real time the moment he understood she'd throw him to federal prosecutors to save herself. Mrs. Keller, I strongly advise you to stop speaking, Brightwell said. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man watching his clients immolate their own case. For the record, Simone said calmly, both defendants have now entered directly, Contradictory federal testimony regarding planning and awareness. Brightwell requested a 5-minute recess. Clayton and Margot moved to the corner, whispered urgently. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Margot, defensive arms crossed. Clayton's posture collapsing into something that looked like betrayed comprehension. When we reconvened, Clayton's face had changed. Something cold and final had settled there. I need to correct my earlier testimony, he said unprompted. Brightwell's hand moved like he might stop him, then fell back to the table. Resignation. I coordinated the contractor invoices to create cover for fund transfers, Clayton said. Each word precise, deliberate. Margot scheduled the luxury post to document ROI for sponsors. We discussed the strategy in August 2020. I suggested targeting Dad because he doesn't monitor social media. The Venmo LLC was Margot's operational structure, but I knew about it from the beginning. Margot's face went white. What are you doing? Telling the truth, Clayton said. He didn't look at her. You just threw me under federal perjury exposure. I'm correcting the record. You just implicated yourself in... I know what I did. Clayton's voice was flat, empty. I was hoping we could minimize it. You made that impossible. Simone let the silence hold. The stenographer's fingers kept moving, recording the marriage ending in real time. The deposition adjourned at 11:30. Simone collected our materials, 300 pages of exhibits, 2 hours of testimony, complete documentation of conspiracy and mutual destruction. Clayton followed us into the corridor. Dad, please, he said, his voice cracked, desperate. I am so sorry. I didn't know she would... I kept walking, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the plea. Clayton's voice in the corridor sounded exactly like it had at age 7, when he'd broken my toolbox. Desperate pleading, the same pitch of child panic, but 72 years had taught me which apologies meant something and which were just noise made by people caught. Dad, what? Clayton's voice rose, footsteps behind me. Please, I know I don't deserve... The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Simone followed. Clayton reached toward me, hand outstretched like a drowning man grasping for rescue. His face was frozen, mid-plea, still forming words I wasn't listening to. I didn't turn around. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The doors closed on my son's face, cutting off whatever he'd been about to say. The elevator descended in silence. Simone stood beside me, didn't ask the question I could feel hanging in the air between us. She didn't need to. The answer was written in the way I'd walked past Clayton, like he was invisible, like he was just another stranger in a corridor, like 47 years of fatherhood had burned down to nothing but ashes and federal testimony. The Chicago Tribune notification lit my phone at 6:03 a.m., breaking the influencer economy's dark side when elderly property owners become unpaid backdrops. I'd left Clayton in that corridor 2 days ago. Hadn't answered his 17 calls, hadn't read his 12 text messages. The elevator doors closing on his pleading face had felt final, like watching a chapter end mid-sentence. Now I stood in my penthouse kitchen with black coffee and dawn light, filtering through windows Margot had monetized without my knowledge. I opened the Tribune app. The article loaded above the fold in the business and technology section. Briar Stanton's byline, senior investigative journalist whose work I'd read for years, sat above 2,400 words of surgical journalism. The lead photo stopped me cold, my penthouse interior screenshot from Margot's Instagram caption, identifying it as undisclosed private property belonging to elderly father-in-law. The opening paragraph landed like a verdict. For 9 years, Vernon Keller's $4.5 million Chicago penthouse served as studio backdrop for his daughter-in-law's influencer empire without his knowledge, consent, or compensation. Federal lawsuit filed October 14th alleges systematic elder financial exploitation facilitated through social media, monetization raising urgent questions about regulatory gaps in the influencer economy. I set my coffee down. Read it again. Every transaction verified, every screenshot timestamped. They'd built the entire case, packaged it for public consumption, transformed my 3 years of quiet documentation into national investigation. The article wasn't just reporting the facts. It was reframing them, elevating my case from family dispute to systemic warning, from personal betrayal to precedent-setting exploitation pattern. I scrolled to the financial section. Interactive infographic mapped the timeline with brutal precision, 847 Instagram posts over 3 years. Luxury purchases, averaging 14 days after emergency transfers. The hidden Venmo LLC detailed with screenshot evidence. Federal case number 123CV07841 linked directly to PACER records for independent verification. A Northwestern elder law professor named Margaret Holloway provided expert analysis. This case could establish precedent for property rights in the age of influencer monetization. Current law treats social media content as free speech, but when that content generates commercial revenue using private property without owner knowledge, we enter uncharted legal territory. AARP spokesperson quoted on emerging exploitation categories. Legal scholars weighing regulatory implications. Every angle covered, every loose thread tied. The article's sidebar referenced the Naperville matter without naming the prior victim, respecting his NDA while making the pattern impossible to miss. Sources indicate federal investigators are examining whether the defendant's monetization strategy constitutes a repeatable exploitation model targeting elderly family members with significant assets. I realized then what the Tribune had actually done. They hadn't just reported my story, they'd transformed it into precedent, into warning system, into the accountability mechanism that the Naperville victims' NDA had prevented. My case wasn't just mine anymore. It was the template. The closing paragraph read like an epitaph for Margot's credibility. As the influencer economy matures without adequate regulation, Vernon Keller's case illuminates the dangerous intersection of family trust, digital monetization, and elder vulnerability. The federal complaint details not just financial theft, but exploitation of relationship dynamics that made discovery nearly impossible. Mr. Keller declined interview requests, stating the documents speak for themselves. I closed the app, drank my coffee, felt something quiet and cold settle in my chest. Complete calm, the kind that comes after years of invisible work, suddenly becomes visible to everyone who'd missed the damage before. My phone buzzed with the first syndication alert at 6:47 a.m. Associated Press Chicago Tribune investigation exposes dark side of influencer economy. Then Reuters Business Wire elderly exploitation case highlights regulatory gaps in social media monetization. Yahoo Finance homepage. Washington Post link in their technology section. CNN Business Brief. The story was achieving national momentum within the first hour. Conrad must have given Briar Stanton everything. Every document we'd collected, every exhibit from the federal filing access to timeline analysis Simone had built. They'd turned 3 years of exploitation into 2,400 words of investigative journalism that would live forever in newspaper archives and legal databases. Watching syndication alerts multiply felt like watching restoration work complete invisible foundation, repairs I'd made in darkness, suddenly making the structure visible to everyone. The damage undeniable, the craftsmanship proven. My phone rang at 7:15. Simone, have you seen the Tribune? She asked. I'm watching it syndicate nationally, I said. Heritage Home Designs just posted public termination of Margot's partnership, Simone said. Her voice carried vindication mixed with something that sounded like awe. Lakefront Living magazine pulled her November feature. They're citing the Tribune article specifically. How many sponsors does she have left? I'm checking now. Pause. Computer keys clicking. Prestige Interiors just canceled the holiday campaign. Vernon, she has 0 corporate sponsors remaining. Every single partnership terminated within 75 minutes of the Tribune going live. I looked out at Chicago skyline, turning gold with morning light. The same view Margot had photographed 900 times, cropped and filtered and captioned with inspirational quotes about gratitude and abundance. Never mentioning she was standing in my home, monetizing my life, converting my trust into revenue. It's done, I said. Simone was quiet for a moment. Then your phone's about to ring again. Thomas Brightwell emailed at 7:02 requesting emergency settlement conference within 48 hours. He's offering full restitution, public apology, and permanent injunction against future monetization. Terms I never even demanded, I said. Terms he's offering unprompted, because the Tribune article made this case national symbol of regulatory failure. Every brand that ever worked with Margot is reviewing their influencer disclosure policies. The FTC is getting calls. Vernon, you didn't just win your case. You changed the entire landscape. My phone buzzed. Brightwell's number. He's calling now, I told Simone. Are you going to answer? I looked at the screen. Thought about Clayton in that corridor reaching toward me like drowning man. Thought about 3 years of systematic exploitation. Thought about the Naperville victim who'd been silenced by legal settlement. Yes, I said, but not yet. I waited 3 days before calling Thomas Brightwell back. Let him sit with the Tribune syndication, the corporate exodus, the complete collapse of his client's credibility. When I finally agreed to mediation, he sounded grateful just to hear my voice. Retired federal magistrate Marcus Henley opened the Monday mediation at 9:20 a.m. sharp. Late 60s silver hair voice that had sentenced white-collar criminals for 30 years, the kind of judicial presence that made lying physically uncomfortable. He sat at the head of the conference table in a federal mediation chamber that smelled like furniture polish and consequence. 9 years of documented financial transfers, totaling $680,000. Judge Henley read from the case summary. His reading glasses caught the overhead light. 847 Instagram posts monetizing plaintiff's property without consent or compensation. Wire fraud. Conversion. Unauthorized commercial use of private property. Defamation through false elder abuse claims. I sat across from Clayton and Margot. Simone beside me, legal pad open, pen ready. Thomas Brightwell beside his clients, looking like a man who'd spent 3 weeks watching his case disintegrate in real time. Clayton looked hollowed out. 47 years old, but appearing older. Eyes red-rimmed suit hanging loose like he'd lost weight. Margot sat rigid, hands folded on the table, staring at nothing. The Tribune investigation elevated this beyond personal dispute, Judge Henley continued. Questions of regulatory precedent, elder exploitation patterns, influencer economy oversight. Both parties benefit from resolution, avoiding protracted litigation that would consume years and considerable resources. He looked at Brightwell. Counsel, my clients are prepared to accept binding terms, Brightwell said quietly. Judge Henley slid documents across the table. Financial terms typed with legal precision. $380,000 over 5 years, representing the fraudulent portion of documented transfers, he said. Secured by first position lien on defendant's Naperville property. $85,000 immediate payment within 14 days, covering emotional distress and plaintiff's legal costs. Total recovery $465,000. Simone leaned close, whispered against my ear. That's more than we demanded. She was right. We'd asked for restitution and legal costs. Judge Henley had added emotional distress compensation. Unprompted, the Tribune article's national impact had changed calculation of damages. Defendants acknowledged these transfers were obtained through material misrepresentation and fraudulent emergency claims. Judge Henley continued. Do you so acknowledge? Yes, Clayton said. Margot's voice was barely audible. Yes, I watched 9 years of systematic exploitation, reduced to binding numbers, and felt something strange. Not satisfaction exactly, more like watching official machinery rebuild what had been dismantled so slowly. I'd barely noticed the damage until I'd documented every piece. 9 years destroyed 60 minutes to formalize reconstruction. It felt surreal, almost too fast. Judge Henley moved to non-monetary terms. Mrs. Keller will publish complete retraction across all social media platforms acknowledging false elder abuse claims and undisclosed commercial monetization. Retraction remains pinned for minimum 72 hours. Language subject to plaintiff's approval. Margot's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Lifetime injunction barring Mrs. Keller from any commercial use of Mr. Vernon Keller's name, likeness, or 1 Bennett Park property imagery. Violation constitutes contempt of court subject to immediate enforcement. Understood, Margot whispered. Mr. Clayton Keller will self-report ethics violation to Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation within 30 days acknowledging participation in elder financial exploitation scheme. Self-reporting may result in unlicensed suspension or professional penalties. Clayton's face went pale. His CPA license, the credential he'd built his career around, would carry permanent ethics violation notation. Every future employer would see it. Every client would question it. I understand, he said. Judge Henley presented the binding settlement documents. Thick stack flag tabs marking signature lines. He slid them to Margot first. Mrs. Keller, do you accept these binding terms? Yes, she said. Sign here, here, and initial all flagged pages. Her hand shook slightly as she signed. She didn't meet my eyes, didn't look at Clayton, just put pen to paper, and ended 9 years of monetizing my life with 6 signatures. Her influencer empire, marriage, credibility, and public reputation ended in black ink on federal settlement documents. Thomas Brightwell witnessed each signature. Legal formality making defeat permanent. Judge Henley took the documents, slid them to Clayton. But Clayton didn't reach for the pen immediately. He looked up, looked directly at me for the first time since the deposition corridor. Dad out, he said, His voice cracked. Judge Henley paused, watching. The monster who threatened you in that parking garage wasn't who I am, Clayton said. Words unprompted, unrehearsed, raw. That was a creature I became because I was terrified of losing her. I thought if I didn't protect her, defend her, fight for her, she'd leave. I'd be alone. Margot shifted beside him, but said nothing. I ended up losing you instead, Clayton continued. Tears streaming down his face now, voice breaking on every word. And you were the one who mattered. The words hit me, like unexpected structural failure. 42 years of fatherhood, teaching him to ride a bike, helping with algebra homework, watching him graduate, walking him through his first tax return, all of it collapsing into the question of whether victory and revenge were actually the same thing, or if I'd confused them somewhere along the way. I couldn't respond. Didn't know what to say. The machinery I'd built had worked perfectly: federal case, Tribune investigation, corporate exodus, binding settlement, but it hadn't prepared me for this moment, for watching my son sign away his professional reputation while admitting the truth I'd been too angry to hear. Clayton picked up the pen, signed the documents with steady hand despite the tears. 6 signatures matching Margot's. Binding terms accepted. Complete capitulation formalized. Judge Henley collected the documents. This mediation is concluded. Settlement terms are binding and enforceable. Court retains jurisdiction for compliance monitoring. It was 10:18 a.m. 78 minutes to dismantle 2 lives and rebuild mine. Simone and I gathered our materials in silence. Clayton sat frozen, still staring at the space where I'd been sitting. Margot stood wooden, following Brightwell toward the door. The elevator descended in silence. Simone didn't ask what I was thinking. She didn't need to. Clayton's words hung between us like unfinished restoration work. You were the one who mattered. Clayton's words followed me home from the mediation. You were the one who mattered. 3 days later, I was still hearing them, still unsure whether victory and revenge had been the same thing, or if I'd confused them somewhere in 9 years of documentation. Tuesday at 11:47 a.m., Margot's court-mandated retraction appeared simultaneously across Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, pinned to the top of feeds that once celebrated her luxury lifestyle. Simone called 30 seconds after it posted. It's live. I pulled up Instagram on my phone. The post sat, pinned above everything else. Stark black text on white background. No filters. No aesthetic layout. Just legal language required by federal settlement. I formally retract and apologize for inaccurate statements regarding Vernon Keller. My prior social media content deliberately concealed $680,000 in financial support provided over 9 years. I accept complete liability for unauthorized commercial monetization of private property. Federal Settlement Case 123 CV 7H1 document systematic exploitation. This retraction remains pinned 72 hours per court order. She changed her handle, Simone said. From Margot Lives Lux to just her legal name, the brand is gone. I scrolled to the comments already flooding in. Hundreds within the first 15 minutes. This is disgusting. You stole from an elderly man. Unfollowing, can't support this. I bought products you recommended. Were those sponsored too? Was everything a lie? She built it on my life, I said. Settlement tore it down with her own signature. By Wednesday morning, the metrics told the story in numbers. Follower count, 89,000, down from 180,000. 91,000 people had watched the retraction and decided they wanted no part of someone who'd systematically exploited her father-in-law for a decade. The audience knows fraud when they see documented proof, Simone said. We were having coffee in my penthouse kitchen, watching the collapse in real time. Comments are demanding refunds on sponsored products, asking which brand partnerships were disclosed, questioning whether any of her content was authentic. My phone buzzed. Conrad Travers. IRS automatically triggers audit when court settlements flag hidden income structures, he said without preamble. That Venmo LLC is going to require Margot to produce 3 years of records. Explain every deposit, justify every expense deduction, potentially pay back taxes, plus penalties on unreported income. How long does that take? Years, Conrad said. And it'll cost her more in accounting fees than she probably made from the LLC. She'll be fighting this audit long after your restitution payments finish. I felt something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. Not revenge exactly, just the knowledge that truth had mechanical consequences, that lies required payment beyond what courts ordered. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Ralph Hutchins, chess club coordinator I'd played against for 6 years before the suspension. Vernon, the board voted unanimously, he said. His voice carried embarrassment mixed with relief. You're reinstated effective immediately. We're, we're sorry we didn't wait for your side. Thank you, I said. Thursday matches resume in January. Your spot's waiting. I walked to my regular cafe that evening. Diana Foster, the manager mid-40s, always remembered my order was behind the counter. She saw me coming and started making black coffee before I reached the register. On the house today, Mr. Keller, she said quietly. And every day, I should have known better. You didn't have all the information, I said. I had 20 years of you being a regular customer who never caused problems. That should have been information enough. I realized then that watching reputation restore felt nothing like revenge. It felt like careful structural repair. Each apology, another mortise joint clicking precisely into place after years of deliberate damage. The social fabric reweaving itself one thread at a time. Friday morning, December 19th, a certified check arrived. $7,666.67. First installment of the 60-month payment structure. The total divided into monthly accountability. I walked to the bank, deposited. It got a receipt. Returned home and placed the receipt beside Sarah's portrait in my study. It's starting to come back, I told her photograph. Not the money, the truth, the record, the proof that what happened was real and had consequences. The first restitution check represented more than money. It was documentation that truth had mechanical weight, that lies eventually required payment, that 9 years of theft could be transformed into 60 months of recorded accountability, each check a notch in permanent ledger, proving I hadn't imagined the damage. My doorbell rang at 6:30 p.m. Simone stood in the hallway holding a wine bottle. Case files officially closed as of 4 o'clock, she said. Thought we should mark the occasion. I invited her in. She settled onto the couch, where she'd first helped me understand digital forensics 4 months earlier, September night, when I'd been drowning in screenshots, and rage when revenge had seemed like the only possible outcome. Briar Stanton emailed this afternoon, I said, pouring 2 glasses. Tribune story got syndicated nationwide through Associated Press. AARP contacted her asking for my documentation strategy. They want to use it as template for their winter newsletter on elder financial exploitation prevention. Simone smiled. Your 9 years of hell might prevent thousands of others from experiencing the same thing. That's legacy, Vernon. That's impact beyond personal vindication. I handed her a glass, sat in the chair across from her. The penthouse felt different now, not restored to what it was before Sarah died, before Clayton married Margot, before 9 years of systematic theft, but rebuilt into something new, something that acknowledged the damage while refusing to let it define the ending. First payment deposited, I said. Community apologizing, national precedent set, case closed. Peace achieved, Simone said, raising her glass. I looked at her. Former federal prosecutor who'd walked away from her career, who'd spent 4 months helping rebuild mine, who was sitting in my living room on Friday evening smiling, like maybe peace wasn't the end of the story, just a different chapter beginning. Peace achieved, I echoed. We drank to that, to closure transforming into something that felt cautiously like future, to the possibility that revenge completed might leave space for whatever came next. The penthouse windows showed Chicago skyline turning gold with winter sunset. Same view Margot had monetized, but mine again now, documented, restored, ready for whatever chapter came after revenge. Simone left around midnight after we'd finished the wine. Her apartment was 4 floors down in the same building, close enough to feel like possibility, distant enough not to demand definition. Peace, I was learning, didn't require labels. I stood on the 42nd floor balcony at 11:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve, holding a Veuve Clicquot flute Sarah had insisted on for special occasions, watching a city that had finally stopped watching me. December wind cut through my jacket, but I didn't move. Below, thousands gathered around Millennium Park and the frozen lakefront preparing for midnight. 3 months ago, that crowd had felt like jury strangers, scrolling through Margot's accusations, forming opinions about an elderly man they'd never met, believing the version that came with better production values. Tonight, they were just people celebrating survival of another year. Not one of them knew my name. The anonymity felt beautiful, ordinary, free. You always said the view was worth protecting, Sarah, I said to the wind and the memory and the champagne bubbles rising in crystal. You never said what protecting it would cost. But she'd been right. She was always right. The city sprawled below, like a circuit board. Lights tracing patterns of human connection, some authentic, some performative, most somewhere between. I could see Navy Pier's Ferris wheel lit up for the occasion, the spot where Margot had filmed 300 Instagram stories, positioning herself as victim. The courthouse where Judge Henley had formalized her defeat, the chess club where Ralph had reinstated me, the cafe where Diana brought free coffee. Thousands of people down there, and not one cared about my federal lawsuit, or my daughter-in-law's destroyed brand, or the 9 years I'd spent being systematically dismantled without noticing. Tonight, I was just another resident with expensive real estate and cheap champagne, watching fireworks explode over frozen water. That kind of ordinary peace I'd fought for 3 months to earn it back. Midnight arrived in countdown shouts echoing up from street level. Fireworks cascaded over Navy Pier in brilliant frozen bursts, gold and silver and blue fire, reflecting off Lake Michigan ice. I raised the champagne flute Sarah had picked out in 1987, the year we'd bought this place. Movement caught my eye 4 floors below. Simone stood on her balcony, 38th floor, looking up. She raised her own glass. I lifted mine in silent toast. Some victories were too big for words. Some partnerships didn't need proximity to mean something. My phone buzzed. Text from Walter Manning: to a much quieter year ahead, my friend. You earned it. I realized Sarah's midnight kiss ritual across 40 years hadn't been about celebration. It was about marking time survived together, acknowledging another year of structural integrity, holding against whatever forces tried to tear you down. Tonight I was kissing the city instead, forgiving it for believing lies, thanking it for eventually choosing truth. Another text arrived at 12:15 a.m. as I was heading inside. Clayton, Happy New Year, Dad. I don't deserve an answer, but wanted you to know I've entered professional restructuring counseling. Individual sessions twice weekly. I mean that with everything I have left. I'm so sorry. I read it twice. Set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. Walked to my study where Sarah's portrait hung beside the framed deposit receipt from the first restitution payment. What do you think? I asked her photograph. Is counseling enough? Does intention repair what action destroyed? Her portrait didn't answer, but I swear I saw that gentle knowing smile, the one that always meant you already know what's right. You're just afraid to do it. The smile that had guided me through 40 years of marriage, 7 years of widowhood, 9 years of exploitation I'd been too blind to see. I didn't respond to Clayton's text. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I didn't delete it either. January 1st morning arrived with clear, cold sunlight. I executed my precise coffee ritual: water, heated to exactly 94 degrees, French press, 4 minutes. The same mechanical precision that had rebuilt my life from documentation and rage. I opened the classic leather moleskin notebook from my garage #1 restoration days. Wrote the date at the top, January 1st, 2024. Below it, what I know to be true today, that I remained blind to 1 year ago. I wrote for myself. Maybe someday for Clayton, if forgiveness ever stopped feeling like surrender. Family can be both blood and choice. Sarah chose me. Simone chose truth over comfort. Clayton chose Margot over integrity, then chose counseling over despair. Which choices define us, the first ones or the corrective ones? Precision isn't just about restoration work. It's about knowing which facts documented cleanly can dismantle any lie. The view from the 42nd floor remains unchanged. What changed was understanding what I was willing to sacrifice to keep it. Writing in the moleskin felt like documenting restoration work, cataloging damage, recording repairs, creating blueprint, so future craftsmen could understand how broken things get rebuilt into something that still bears weight. At noon, I returned to the balcony. Same spot I'd stood 12 hours earlier. Same view that had cost me 9 years of exploitation, 3 months of methodical revenge, 1 son's fractured relationship, and whatever Sarah would have counseled me toward if she'd lived to see it. I traced the chronology backward. December 31, case closed, peace achieved. October 14, Federal Filing Tribune investigation, corporate exodus. September 27, single Facebook photo that destroyed 9 years of silence. 3 months from discovery to resolution. 9 years from first exploitation to final restitution check. 72 years from birth to this moment. Standing on frozen balcony with clear title deed and documented vindication, and no idea whether victory and healing were the same thing. Sarah had been right about the view. But she never told me protecting it would mean losing my son, gaining a warrior ally. and learning that justice and revenge sometimes wear identical faces until you're too close to tell them apart. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Clayton's unanswered text still waiting. A different kind of structural problem requiring different tools than revenge had provided. Below, the city continued its ordinary Sunday rhythm, unaware that a 72-year-old man on the 42nd floor had just decided that maybe, eventually, forgiveness was the final restoration project. Not today, but maybe someday. The view from the 42nd floor hasn't changed, but the man standing here calculating vindicated, still breathing, he's been rebuilt from foundation up. And the view, every single frozen, brilliant inch of it was worth every battle I fought to keep it mine. And to you listening to my story, remember this. A father's revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet documentation, patient collection of facts, and the willingness to protect what you've built even when it costs you everything familiar. Don't make my mistake of trusting without verifying. I spent 9 years thinking I was helping family when I was actually funding my own exploitation. I should have asked questions earlier, requested receipts, documented inconsistencies the moment they appeared. Love doesn't require blindness. Trust doesn't mean abandoning common sense. If something feels wrong, it probably is, and you owe it to yourself to look closer before the damage becomes irreversible. The lesson I learned through all of this is simple, but brutal. Precision matters. In restoration work and documentation, in protecting what's yours. Every screenshot I saved, every bank statement I organized, every timeline I built, those weren't acts of paranoia. They were acts of self-preservation. A father's revenge, when it's justified, isn't about destruction. It's about restoration, rebuilding what was systematically dismantled, reclaiming truth when lies have become the accepted narrative. I believe God gave me the patience to document everything methodically, instead of reacting in rage, and that patience changed everything. The Lord's timing brought the right people into my path exactly when I needed them. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my position? Would you have pursued a father's revenge through the legal system, or would forgiveness have come first? Drop a comment and share your perspective. Your answer might help someone else facing a similar choice. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Father's Vengeance for more true stories about justice, family, and the complicated choices we face when the people we trust betray us. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters, and I'm grateful you spent it here with me. Final reminder, certain details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling and privacy. But the core lesson about documentation, precision, and protecting what's yours, that part is completely real.